Chapter 778. This matter was even spread to be a romantic affair. In short, no one objected to this kind of unreasonable action. After Wu Sai inquired about the news, he no longer held any hope for this country. This was a powerful country that was going downhill. Once the meet started, it was a little hard to stop. But in order not to get pregnant, Gong Dai secretly went to take medicine. This way, nothing would disturb their two-person world. This absurd situation continued for a few days. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo to rest on the bed. He was thinking in his heart, tomorrow was the big wedding, how should he give her a surprise? At this moment, someone reported from outside the door. Your Highness, someone is making trouble in the street. Gong Dai slightly raised his brows. This was a rare occurrence. Gong Yimo immediately jumped up. Making trouble? Good, good. I'll go take a look. Gong Dai, you play by yourself. She was just complaining that her life was too relaxed. Seeing Gong Yimo's carefree look, Gong Dai shook his head. Royal sister, you're abandoning me so easily. You're really heartless. Gong Yimo nibbled on his mouth. You haven't eaten enough these 2 days. I'm already full. Be good, I'll go out to rest and then come back to pamper you. Gong Dai couldn't help but lean forward and bite her lips, saying in a low voice, be careful. The guard who was reporting at the door blushed when he heard this. Moreover, the princess was already at the stage of perfection. Shouldn't it be the people outside who should be careful? He didn't know how His Highness could speak in such a worried tone. Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. I know. After saying that, she ran off like a flower. Gong Dai looked at her cheerful back and his heart warmed. It turned out that he had been chasing after this kind of life for his entire life. With a lively wife, adorable children, and a stable country, every day would become very fulfilling. Gong Yimo held her waist as soon as she came out. In the past few days, Gong Dai had fully played the role of an incapable ruler who never attended morning court. He also ordered that since the emperor was still young, he could not wake up early, which would affect his growth and development. Therefore, in the future, the morning court would be held once every 7 days, and if there was any matter, it would be passed directly to the 6 ministers, who would then pass it to him. Gong Yimo blushed. She thought of the time when Gong Cheng was still alive, almost every morning, and Gong Dai, just because she complained that she couldn't sleep in with him in the morning, he gave such an order. He really had the potential to be an incapable ruler. Although she thought so, Gong Yimo was still happy. She didn't want to pretend to be virtuous and magnanimous to meet someone who doted on her so much. At this moment, the streets were already in chaos. Some elderly Buddhists followed Chu Xian and the others as they walked the streets. The monks were all wearing golden robes, carrying the image of a treasure. In Chu Xian's hand was a small silver flask filled with holy water. Behind them were a few older believers. They held scriptures in their hands and followed excitedly. The holy water brought by holy monk Chu Xian is really miraculous. After drinking it, I feel like my whole body is filled with endless energy. Yes, my knees don't even hurt anymore. Is it really that good? You'll know when you try it. He's a senior monk from India. The Buddha's golden light illuminates the world. Some people who didn't know what was going on also started to join the parade. In Dayu State, there were both Buddhists and Taoists, but the people in power didn't believe in Buddhism, so these two sects didn't develop quickly. Taoists were particular about having no desires, and some Buddhist masters only occasionally discussed Buddhist scriptures with others. Therefore, it was the first time such a large parade of sects in Dayu State. Gong Yimo sat on a roof to watch the show. She frowned when she saw that Chu Xian and the others had gathered a lot of people and were blocking the traffic. She saw them stop in the middle of the square. Greetings, benefactors. Chu Xian greeted the people behind him, and the crowd quickly returned the greeting. It was a grand scene. Chu Xian smiled kindly. This poor monk came from India to preach here. Thank you for coming. Buddha says to deliver all living beings from torment. This poor monk has the holy water from India. I hope it will refresh everyone's mind. Chu Xian and the others had already received Gong Dai's approval, so although the city guards weren't happy, they didn't interfere. Gong Yimo couldn't help but jump out and land on the canopy behind Chu Xian when she saw that Chu Xian was going to present them with the holy water, and the people were so happy. However, the person holding the canopy didn't notice. When he heard the crowd's cheers and looked up, he saw a person standing on top of the canopy. When he subconsciously let go of the canopy, it landed firmly on the ground and didn't move at all. Gong Yimo followed the umbrella-shaped canopy and turned around. "Oh my, you have something good." Chu Xian was stunned when he heard the voice. When he saw Gong Yimo standing on top of the canopy and looking down, he widened his eyes in disbelief. The crowd didn't see who it was at first, but when they saw who it was, they cheered. "Princess, it's the princess." The princess seems to have become prettier. Of course, the princess is a fairy from heaven. She's 20 this year and 18 next year. Hearing the crowd's discussion, Chu Xian was surprised that this woman's influence in Daiyu State was much stronger than he imagined. What was going on? Were men and women equal in Daiyu State? Of course, it wasn't equal. However, because of Gong Yimo's appearance, the atmosphere in Daiyu State was much better than in other countries. Gong Yimo smiled and waved at the crowd. Then, she said to Chu Xian, who didn't look happy, "Holy monk, you haven't shown me your good stuff." She didn't hold back, but the way she pouted and acted cute made everyone think that the princess didn't mean it. Also, the princess didn't need to be polite to anyone. Chu Xian couldn't back down. However, he remembered that she was a woman after all. Even if she was good at martial arts, it didn't mean much. Could it be that she was also good at medicine? So, he reached out and handed over the silver bottle that was in his arms. However, he still underestimated Gong Yimo's ability. As soon as the silver bottle appeared, Gong Yimo waved her hand and held it firmly in her palm. He was shocked. Holy water needed to be diluted with water. This woman wouldn't drink it just like that, right? He wanted to stop her, but then he remembered that if this water wasn't diluted, it would make people feel drunk. It would be better the next day. If that was the case, he could let her drink it to prevent her from messing things up later. Gong Yimo opened the bottle and smelled the scent of herbs. She didn't know what he added in. So, she tilted her head back and drank a little. The moment she drank it, she felt sweet and excited. It made her feel like she was floating, as if she was going to be blown away by the wind. Chapter 779. Could it be an ancient stimulant? And it was an improved version. Because she did not feel any discomfort, she raised her head and drank the entire bottle. Anyway, her current body was absolutely impervious to poison. Seeing Gong Yimo drink all the holy water, Chu Xian was dumbfounded, but it was too late to stop her. Furthermore, he was a little anxious. Would something happen if she drank so much? When the time came, that man would definitely not let them off. After Gong Yimo finished drinking, her face turned unnaturally red. When the secret guard beside her saw this, he felt that it was dangerous, so he hurriedly went to report to Gong Dai. But he did not know that after he left, Gong Yimo threw the bottle and laughed out loud. The silver bottle hit the ground and made a muffled sound. She floated down from the imperial canopy and it landed on the ground, stirring up a lot of dust. She smiled sweetly and landed beside Chu Xian, saying slowly to him, "There is something in here that is not good for people's health." Gong Yimo's certainty shocked Chu Xian. "Female benefactor, don't slander me. This poor monk's holy water came from India, and if it is harmful, why did female benefactor drink all of it?" What he meant was that Gong Yimo was slandering him. Anyway, the holy water had been finished, so there was no evidence. Gong Yimo's face turned redder and redder. "Everyone will know once they see me. There is a stimulant in your water. Those who drank your holy water will definitely feel weak when they go back. It might even cause more terrible after effect. As for me, I am clearly impervious to poison, but I have been harmed by you." Her tone sounded a little coquettish, but her face was red, making people want to take a bite out of it. Chu Xian gritted his teeth and said, "Female benefactor, don't try to taint this poor monk's innocence. You don't have any evidence, so how can you insult this poor monk?" What he was thinking was that these people present were all Buddhists. Under the circumstances where there was no evidence, could it be that they would believe the words of a little girl? With that thought in mind, he rolled his eyes and became a little bolder. We came from afar with friendly beliefs in order to deliver all living beings from torment and enlighten the world. Female patron, if you insult this penniless monk has nothing to say. However, the holy water is produced by the Bodhi tree's leaves. By questioning the holy water, you are blaspheming my Buddha. If you don't apologize today, you will be condemned by all the believers in the world. His words were serious, but at the end of the day, he just wanted to gain some benefits. If he could grasp the other party's mistake and use this opportunity to establish a Buddhist temple here, it would become the largest breeding ground in the Eastern Earth. Then, his name would be passed down eternally. Therefore, he took a step forward and said in a serious tone, "Benefactor, please take back your word." Gong Yimo was forced to take a step back. She frowned slightly and looked dizzy. Chu Xian was pleased to see her like this. It would be even better if he could force her to do something irreversible. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo pursed her lips and shouted, "I told you that the holy water is poisonous, so what?" They all listened to me. Chu Xian sneered inwardly when he saw that she had indeed been provoked to the point of speaking without thinking. This woman was really spoiled. She dared to say such things without any evidence. Did she think that these people were her parents and relatives? She was too arrogant. Unexpectedly, after the crowd fell silent for a moment, there was a strong reaction. "Yes. We will listen to the princess. The princess must be right. There must be poison in the water. What should we do? Nothing will happen to us after drinking the water, right?" The sudden reaction stunned Chu Xian for a long time. He thought that he had misheard because he didn't expect these people to be so blind. If this woman said there was poison, then there was poison. She didn't even want evidence. Were the people of Dai Yu State all fools? While he was panicking, the people he brought with him were also confused and panicked. As they didn't understand the language of Dai Yu State, they could only watch as the gazes of the people around them turned from respect to suspicion. Could it be that the master had done something that angered the crowd? Seeing Chu Xian's face turn green and white, Gong Yimo blushed and smiled proudly. "Now you know." "No, what?" Chu Xian asked instinctively. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. "I said before that no matter what your motives are, you will not succeed in Dai Yu State because the people of Dai Yu State are my people. They are all mine." As soon as she said that, before Chu Xian could respond, a wave of cheers came from behind him. "Yes. We are all the princess's people. We pledge our lives to serve the princess." The enthusiasm of the people seemed to be contagious as the cheers became louder and louder. This was a scene that these people had never seen before. They never knew of any country where a woman could receive so much trust and cheers. And this woman's existence had created a nightmare for them. "Get out of here, you bad people. How dare you bully the princess? You are definitely not a good person. You even said that you are from India. Could it be that you are lying? A true master likes to be quiet. Why would you show your face in public like this? That's right. You even tricked us into drinking some holy water." Being ostracized by the crowd made it difficult for this group of people to move forward. Chu Xian's original plan was to get them to drink the holy water and then encourage them to believe in Buddhism when they were excited. Every time, they would receive an unprecedented response. This method had been tried and tested time and time again. Why did it fail inexplicably when they reached Dai Yu State? Actually, it wasn't their fault. Their plan was very effective, but the downside was that Dai Yu State had Gong Dai and the eccentric Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was drunk, but she still smiled and waved at the crowd to express her gratitude for their support. Who knew that at this moment, a voice would suddenly interrupt? It sounded a little strange. Dai Yu State is known as the strongest country in the East, but their actions are worse than those of barbarians. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and saw that it was Wu's. He had rushed over with his men. Seeing that his plan had been interrupted by Gong Yimo, he was burning with anger. Furthermore, he had already told the leader of Dai Yu State that he would preach Buddhism in the city. Was he going back on his word? Gong Yimo smacked her lips. "What do you mean by that? What position do you have to say that?" Wu snorted. "Did I say anything wrong? So Dai Yu State is actually such a country. It has a good reputation, but it is so unbearable on the inside. Even those small countries know that it is shameless for a sister to have an affair with a brother. Gong Yimo was excited at this moment. When she heard this, the people were angry. She was also a little angry. She immediately took out the imperial edict that Gong Cheng had given her from her space. When the imperial edict appeared, everyone knelt down. Wu's and the rest didn't know what was going on and still stood there. Chapter 780. Gong Yimo took out the imperial edict and posed. However, she could no longer see the words on it, so she passed it to a commoner beside her and let him read it. It was the first time that person touched the imperial edict, so he read it out fearfully. By the will of the heavens, my seventh daughter, Gong Yimo, is not my biological daughter, but the son of concubine Xue. I took pity on her young and innocent age and took her in as my biological daughter. Today, my daughter and my ninth son are in love, and their love is stronger than gold. I cannot bear to break them apart, so I hereby issue this edict to correct their relationship. After that person finished reading it, he was slightly shocked. The commoners were also shocked. This was actually the late emperor's edict, and he actually said that Gong Yimo was someone else's child. As an emperor, not only did he raise someone else's child, he even treated her as his own. But the strange thing was that when they heard this edict, not only did they not feel that the late emperor had embarrassed the imperial family, they even felt that this was a good emperor. Not only did he not hurt the innocent, but he also treated everyone equally. In the end, he was even willing to correct Gong Yimo's name. Such an emperor was hard to find even in 100 years. It was no wonder that the children he raised were all excellent and had truly benefited the commoners. So the commoners were moved and they kneeled down and cheered. Long live your majesty, long live. Gong Yimo got everyone to rise. She shook the imperial edict and said proudly to Wu's. You heard it now. I am not Gong Dai's biological sister, we are together, so there is no relationship between us. When the commoners thought of how Gong Yimo had suffered because of this matter, they were furious that this group of people brought up this matter again. They all glared at them angrily. Wu's did not expect such a turn of events. In a hurry, he shouted, how can there be such a coincidence? The edict in your hand must be fake. Wasn't it normal to create such a fake imperial edict for the sake of a good reputation? Who dares to fake the late emperor's edict? Aren't you afraid of getting your tongue pulled out by slandering me like this? Gong Dai hurried over. Following his arrival, he brought a large group of imperial guards who quickly captured all the foreigners. His eyes were cold, and his face was covered with frost. Originally, he thought that their so-called preaching of Buddhism was just an ordinary discussion of the scriptures. He didn't expect that they were encouraging the people to parade through the streets and even gave the people strange things to drink. Speaking of this, Gong Dai nervously looked at Gong Yimo's red face. He couldn't suppress his anger. You. When he saw the confused look in Gong Yimo's eyes, he lowered his tone by an octave. In the end, he pinched her face in exasperation. Girl, even if you've reached the transcendent state, you can't drink everything. She was really a treasure. He couldn't hit her or scold her. Even when she made a mistake, he didn't want to be fierce. He only wanted to coax her. Gong Yimo pouted. It's fine. I'm immune to poison. As she spoke, she even patted her chest, which had become even fuller after giving birth to the baby. Gong Dai's eyes darkened, and then he became angry again. He was ready to vent all his anger on those foreigners. But Gong Yimo grabbed his hand and didn't let him move. Seeing that Gong Yimo's face was very red, Gong Dai controlled his temper and coaxed, Good royal sister, wait for a while. I'll take you back after I've dealt with them. But Gong Yimo couldn't help but shake her head. I'm no longer your royal sister. Gong Yimo proudly waved the imperial edict. Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh. When the people present saw this scene, they were also happy. After all, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai had gone through a lot to reach this stage. Everyone had seen it. Hence, many people laughed kindly. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo was around and he couldn't maintain his usual cold face. He coughed and adjusted his expression. But he didn't expect that Gong Yimo suddenly knelt down on one knee. What are you doing? Gongju was taken aback by her sudden action. He was a little worried when he thought that royal sister would do something out of line every time she drank. Although she wasn't drinking now, her state was almost as if she had been drinking. Gong Yimo suddenly said loudly, "Gong Dai, marry me. I want to be your wife." When these words came out, it could be said that the crowd was in an uproar. What did they hear? The princess was actually proposing to the regent. That's right, the previous wedding was interrupted. It was time to do it again. Gong Dai's face instantly flushed red. He subconsciously looked around. Everywhere he looked, all the eager gazes lowered their heads. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. After all, he wasn't 19 yet. It was his first time being proposed to in public. His cold face was about to crack. It seemed that royal sister was indeed not sober. He should bring her back. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing. Royal sister would be angry that he didn't stop her in time. Gong Dai opened his mouth. In the next second, he was attracted by the other party's focused look. Although her face was very red, her gaze was very clear. Looking at him, it was as if she was looking at the whole world. Gong Ju could hear the sound of his own heartbeat under such intense and single-minded gazes. The surrounding noises all disappeared. Gong Yimo held his right hand tightly and said slowly, "I'm very sober now. I want to tell you that I love you. I can't leave you. I want to be with you forever. We'll walk the bridge of helplessness together. We'll walk the road to life together. Are you willing?" Gong Dai's heart beat faster and faster. Gong Yimo's hand was boiling hot. It burned all the way to his chest. It was very hot. "Gong Dai, do you love me?" How could he not love her? He loved this woman so much. Gong Ju pulled her up and hugged her fiercely in his arms. Heaven and earth could be his witness. He had wanted to give her a surprise, but she gave him a surprise instead. This feeling was like a landslide, but it was happy and boiling. At this moment, he couldn't say a single word. He could only hug her tightly. At this moment, someone shouted, "Get married, get married." Then, more and more people egged them on. "Get married." The crowd shouted more and more passionately. The two people who were hugging each other felt like they were in a whirlpool. The world was spinning, and they only had each other. In a daze, Gong Yimo asked foolishly, "Gong Dai, you haven't said if you're going to marry me or not." Gong Dai was so angry that he bit her neck. "Tomorrow is the wedding. Are you doing this on purpose?" Gong Yimo pretended to be shocked. "What? How about this? You propose to me again. I'll pretend to be very surprised." Gong Dai kissed her little mouth that made people love and hate her. He should have sucked on her lips long ago to prevent her from saying so many things that would shock him mentally. At that moment, screams were endless. But very soon, the crowd quieted down. This scene was very challenging for the ancients' tolerance, but it was undeniable that their hearts were beating very fast at this moment. The throbbing of love seemed to be contagious. "I'll marry you." After the kiss, Gong Dai held Gong Yimo's face and looked deeply into her eyes. He said each word clearly. "Also, I love you. Whether it's the bridge of helplessness or the path of rebirth, I'll walk with you." Wow! At that moment, the crowd's cheers almost overturned the sky. Chapter 781. Because she was in a good mood, Gong Yimo waved her hand and chased away those ambitious outsiders. Wu's and the others finally understood that they could not control the Dai Yu state. They quickly left without saying anything. Gong Yimo laughed proudly behind them. The departure of these people did not cause any ripples in the crowd, because they were already stunned by the golden boy and jade girl in front of them. Hearing that they were going to get married tomorrow, the crowd crowded around and loudly expressed their blessings. Enthusiasm was contagious. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo's waist and announced on the spot that starting tomorrow, the regent's residence would hold a banquet for 7 days. The whole country would be exempt from taxes for a year. It was a celebration. The joyous voices instantly burst out. The regent was mighty. The day of the wedding slowly arrived amidst the cheers of the crowd. The next morning, the streets were empty. Because of the regent's strict defense, The other countries did not know about the wedding and only sent gifts for the children's 1-month-old. But the regent was too evil. He sent people to deliver the wedding invitation, but deliberately waited until today to deliver it. This way, those people would know that Gong Yimo was going to get married, but they would not appear even if they had wings. Naturally, they would not disturb the wedding today. Gong Dai was very proud. After today, those people would give up. But even if they did not give up, there was no other way. Because the royal sister was already his. In the noisy sound of gongs and drums, the people crowded around the bridal sedan and toured the city. Everyone was as happy as if they were marrying off their own daughter. Because there were too many people, the bridal sedan arrived at the regent's residence very late and almost missed the auspicious hour. Gong Dai had been waiting anxiously for a long time. In order to marry Gong Yimo, he did not know how long he had been waiting. This time, he was afraid that something would happen. Although it was impossible, his nerves were still tense. He only relaxed when he saw the bridal sedan and could not help but smile. "Princess, the prince is waiting anxiously," the matron of honor said with a smile outside the sedan. Gong Yimo was a little anxious when she heard this. She couldn't wait to meet Gong Dai at this moment. Finally, the sedan stopped and the curtain was lifted, revealing the bride wearing a veil. The matron of honor was about to say something, but Gong Dai had already bent down and carried her out. Gong Yimo exclaimed softly and hammered Gong Dai twice with her small hands. In return, Gong Dai teased her in a muffled voice. "Royal sister is shy." Gong Yimo glared at him through the veil. "Can you not be so impatient?" "I can't not be anxious." Gong Dai smiled and hugged her even tighter. "I'm afraid that something will happen again, so I have to hurry." Gong Yimo was speechless, but the joy in her heart gushed out and filled her entire heart. After a moment of surprise, the guests expressed their understanding. The relationship between these two was really good. They were clearly together, but they were still stuck together like glue and as sweet as old friends. It was hard to imagine that a person like Gong Dai could laugh so happily. That happy appearance made the hearts of all the officials' wives beat non-stop. They wished that they were born a few years later. Thus, under everyone's gaze, on this joyous day, Gong Dai carried Gong Yimo step by step towards the wedding hall. On the way, he secretly told her a piece of news. Sai Wuyan sent an urgent message. He said that the antidote we sent over last time was the GU poison antidote. Gong Yimo was delighted. "Really? That's great. In the future, no one will be able to use this thing to cause trouble." Gong Dai continued, "Royal sister, you still don't know, right? In order to commemorate and thank you, the other 3 countries have set up statues of you in their capitals." Gong Yimo proudly raised her chin and proudly said in his arms, "Yes, it's what I should do. I deserve it. Hee hee." A mischievous look flashed across Gong Dai's eyes. "Cough, and most importantly, today is our son's 1-month-old celebration. Double happiness. Are you happy?" As he spoke, Gong Dai put Gong Yimo down. Then, a palace servant smilingly carried a pink and jade-like toddler over. The toddler was looking at them with big eyes and licking his fingers. Gong Yimo was unwilling this time. Her eyes were round under the veil. "How can that be? No matter, no one can disturb our wedding day, not even our son." Gong Dai listened to her jealous words and laughed again. Through the veil, he lovingly pinched her nose. The love in his eyes could drown her. "I'm lying, little girl. Our son is the witness of our wedding day." Gong Yimo was coaxed by his tone until her cheeks turned red. Only then did she feel that it wasn't good for an adult to compete with her son for favor. She pretended to lower her head in embarrassment. "Annoying. You only know how to bully me." Gong Dai leaned closer and said in a pleasant and elegant voice. "I'm going to bully you for a lifetime." Gong Yimo's heart pounded. She didn't understand why Gong Dai was still so flirtatious even though they were already an old married couple. Next was all kinds of etiquette. Then, they bowed to heaven and earth. After that, they were directly sent to the bridal chamber. No one dared to ask them to come out to socialize. Naturally, no one dared to force Gong Dai to drink. But the banquet continued. Everyone could indulge in music and song to their heart's content. Because the regent was in a good mood today, he definitely wouldn't find trouble with them. Gong Yimo was personally placed on the bed by Gong Dai. That gentle action instantly surrounded her with Gong Dai's cold aura. Gong Yimo suddenly felt a little nervous. Her hands clutched her skirt, and she didn't dare to move. There was no one in the room. The wedding nanny should have been there, but Gong Dai drove her away. Today's wedding was only for the two of them. Are you afraid? Gong Dai's smiling voice flowed in the room, making Gong Yimo more nervous. Fortunately, Gong Dai sat beside her with 2 glasses of wine. Now that we have a child, we don't have to do those formalities. But we must drink the wedding wine. Gong Yimo was slightly stunned. Aren't you going to lift the veil first? Gong Dai said mysteriously. No hurry. With that, his hand passed through the veil and handed a glass of wine to her lips. He coaxed her gently. Good girl, drink it. Gong Yimo drank it up in a daze. Then, she grabbed his other hand with both hands and sent another glass of wine to his mouth. You drink too. Gong Dai smiled and lowered his head to drink it up. The swallowing sound was so obvious that it was like some kind of hint, which made Gong Yimo more flustered. After drinking the wine, Gong Dai reached out to her, but he didn't take off the veil. Instead, he took off her clothes. Gong Yimo was shocked. Why are you? Gong Dai chuckled. He leaned over and whispered in her ear. Royal sister, don't you want to try closing your eyes in the bridal room? Gong Yimo was aroused by his voice and trembled all over. In the next second, her veil was taken off. But before she could see anything clearly, the veil was tied over her eyes and she couldn't see anything. Gong Ju gently removed her crown, allowing her long hair to cascade down. Then, he gently took off her clothes so that she couldn't hide. Gong Yimo's entire body turned pink. She curled up on the bright red bedsheets, making one's mouth dry for no reason. She felt Gong Dai's burning gaze, and because she couldn't see, the stimulation was even more intense. Royal sister, his voice was so low and hoarse. You should really see how beautiful you are. How irresistible you are. Gong Yimo heard his suggestive words and her body trembled slightly, making one feel pity for her. But she didn't admit defeat. Her red lips curled up and she said stubbornly, if you want to do it, then do it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? When Gong Dai heard this, he immediately took off his clothes and pounced on her. The moment the two of them hugged each other, they felt as if the flaw in their lives had finally been repaired. Gong Dai's ink-black eyes quietly looked at the delicate face beneath him and he sighed in satisfaction. Thank you for letting me love you. He said it emotionally. Although it was simple, it made Gong Yimo's heart palpitate. She couldn't help but take the initiative to lean forward and kiss him. Before he could react, she moaned softly and turned to the side with a red face. Since that's the case, I ask the Prince Regent to love this consort well, for the rest of my life. When Gong Dai heard this, his eyes shone brightly. He turned her face and forcefully sucked on her lips. He fiercely bit her lips while panting as he told her, "As you wish, my princess." Chapter 782. Also known as, Little Tuan Chi Yu's tragic life. Spring passed and autumn came. Day and night alternated. Unknowingly, the little dumpling from back then had already grown up. Moreover, his face was serious, and he looked a little old-fashioned. In the morning, politics, geography, scripture, arithmetic. In the afternoon, equestrian archery, kuju, vocal music, calligraphy. Now that Gong Qiyu was 7 years old, his personality was surprisingly determined. Not only did he persevere with such heavy studies day after day, but he also did very well. Back then, Gong Yimo said that the homework was too heavy and that it wasn't good and would affect the child's growth and development. However, little Gong Qiyu refused. There were even a few classes that he took the initiative to add, just so that he could develop in an all-round way and become an outstanding person like his father. As for others saying that his father was taught by his mother, little Gong Qiyu expressed that he was already 7 years old. How could they treat him like a 3-year-old child? On a summer afternoon, Gong Qiyu was practicing calligraphy while thinking angrily. Beside his hand was the calligraphy that his father had personally written. When the little one's gaze landed on it, There was a kind of almost obsessive worship. He had to work hard. As long as he was outstanding enough, his father would definitely value him more. With this thought, he was full of enthusiasm and wrote more than 10 big words. It was no wonder that he worked so hard. It was because he had fallen out of favor since he was young. Growing up, it could be written into a history of blood and tears. And the source of all this evil was his mother. His mother was very bad. When he was 3 years old, she snatched his milk cake. He went to his father to complain, but his father hugged him and said, "Chiyu is a man. Chiyu is a man, and men don't eat sweets. But if you want to eat, royal father will compensate you." Later, although he received his father's compensation, he didn't want to eat sweets anymore. He wanted to be a man. However, every time he saw his mother proudly eating desserts, he would still drool and then walk away proudly. When he was 4 years old, his sister was born. His father hugged his sister all day long. He was jealous and wanted his father to hug him. His father told him righteously, "You are the older brother. You have to give in to your sister. She is very fragile now, so you have to protect her well." After that, he never mentioned this matter again. However, one day, Lady Mother went to reason with Lord Father. She said that he liked children and didn't like her anymore. Lord Father hurriedly threw his younger sister to the palace servants and hugged Lady Mother for a long time to coax her. This was nothing. The most infuriating thing was that when he was 5 years old, he fought with his mother because he was competing for her favor. As expected, Imperial Father first coaxed Imperial Concubine Mother before lecturing him. "Chiyu, you're a man. Shouldn't you give in to your mother?" Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly and asked in a deep voice. Gong Chiyu said angrily, "Why didn't she give in to me?" Gong Dai told him very seriously, "Chiyu, have you forgotten that you are already an adult?" Gong Chiyu pursed his lips. But Imperial Mother is also an adult, right?" Gong Dai sighed and patted his head. "You're wrong. Your mother is still a child." After saying this, the father and son looked at each other and there was a strange silence. When he was 6 years old, not only was his mother's status above his, but his little sister, whose nickname was Little Bean, also started to compete for favor. When he ate, he could only sit upright and eat by himself. However, his little sister refused and insisted that Lord Father carry her and feed her. She would even use a very soft and cute voice to call Lord Father. Every time she called him that, she would blink her big eyes and Lord Father's expression would soften. It was as if he wanted to hug his little sister and not let go. Gong Chiyu saw it. Every time he ate, his chopsticks would pierce the bottom of the bowl. However, he couldn't stand it anymore. There were others who couldn't stand it either. His mother put down the bowl and said angrily, "From tonight onwards, you'll sleep with Little Bean. We'll sleep in separate rooms." At that moment, Gong Chiyu saw the smile on his father's face instantly freeze. In the next second, he stuffed the Little Bean into his father's hands and moved closer to his mother's side to inquire about her well-being. That was called being gentle. Little Bean and Little Bean trembled. They looked at their mother, who was enjoying her husband's feeding, with envy, jealousy, and hatred. The two little ones looked at each other and saw sparks flying in each other's eyes. It seemed that if they didn't defeat Lord Mother, they wouldn't be able to obtain Lord Father's favor for the rest of their lives. Thus, a vigorous family feud unfolded. Little Bean used her looks and young age to pester Lord Father. Little Rice Ball used her eagerness to learn and be sensible to attract Lord Father's attention. During the day, Little Bean pestered Lord Father to teach him. Actually, he knew all that, but he liked to listen to Lord Father teach him again. Lord Father's teaching was very different from Grand Tutor's. When Grand Tutor taught, he always had to show off his knowledge, quote the classics, and deliberately complicate the knowledge points. However, Lord Father was different. With just a few words, he could summarize the main points and draw inferences, allowing Little Bean to learn new things. His only dissatisfaction was probably every time Little Bean said, "Lord Father is so amazing." Lord Father would stroke his head and lie to him. "What Lord Father knows, it was all taught by your mother." Gong Chiyu was speechless. At night, it was Little Bean's chance. He would always walk over to Lord Father to hug him. Today was, "Lord Father, It's so dark at night. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Tomorrow was. Lord Father, there's thunder. It's so scary. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Even if there was a wet nurse accompanying him, he would still avoid the wet nurse to look for Gong Dai. Lord Father, I had a nightmare. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Sometimes, when Gong Dai refused, Little Bin would start her performance. Her big eyes would be filled with tears, but she would look at Gong Dai with a pitiful gaze. This was definitely hereditary. Gong Dai expressed that he couldn't handle it at all. However, when it made him waver, Gong Yimo would snort coldly and pull his heart back. However, he was her child after all. Gong Yimo also had times when she was soft-hearted, so Little Bin would succeed once or twice out of 10 times. Gong Dai didn't know whether to laugh or cry in the face of the infighting in the family. In front of him was the passionate worship of the 2 children, behind him was the resentful gaze of his precious wife. He couldn't eat well every day. He always felt that it wasn't right to continue like this. Until one day, Gong Yimo angrily ran away from home with Qiu Xingfeng. Only then did Gong Dai realize the seriousness of the matter and hurriedly ran out to look for them. Only then did the 2 little ones completely stop. They finally recognized a fact. First, Lord Father would always dote on Lady Mother the most. Second, without Lady Mother, they would also lose Lord Father. Therefore, when Gong Yimo came back again, the family of 4 stopped. The 2 little ones tried their best to act cute to keep Gong Yimo, afraid that she would run away. Little Bean and Qiu Tuanzi both accepted their fate. If they were ranked below Lady Mother, then so be it. After all, Lady Mother wasn't that bad. Looking carefully, there were quite a lot of advantages. Thinking of this, Gong Qiu broke the writing brush. Fine, this piece of paper was ruined. Chapter 783. Spring went and autumn came again. Little Tuan Gong Qiu was already 10 years old, and the little Bin Gong Coco was 6 years old. However, as they grew older, Gong Dai fell out of favor. The reason was none other than that they finally realized how deep Gong Yimo was. Gong Dai was very busy, so the heavy responsibility of teaching them martial arts fell on Gong Yimo. Gong Qiu was originally disdainful because he felt that his Lady Mother's martial arts were definitely not as good as his Lord Father's. After all, his Lady Mother only knew how to play every day, unlike his Lord Father who diligently practiced martial arts. However, after he was beaten to the ground by Gong Yimo time and time again, he realized that it was not a lie when people said that his Lord Father's martial arts were taught by his Lady Mother. Thus, he was very unconvinced and swore to surpass her. On the other hand, Gong Coco was more pure. She was a super foodie. Every time Gong Yimo made something delicious, she just had to act cute and Gong Yimo was very willing to share it with her. Those chocolates, puddings, and cream cakes were simply so delicious that their tongues were about to melt. Of course, all of this was attributed to Gong Yimo having a dessert encyclopedia that greatly satisfied their taste buds. Gradually, Gong Coco felt that it was not bad to share her Lord Father with her mother. No, no, no. Mother is much better than Lord Father. Lord Father will not allow her to eat desserts without restraint like this. However, what really made the 2 little ones start to completely change sides was the endless stories that Gong Yimo spoke of. The most common story in the palace was that Gong Yimo brought the 2 little ones to sit in the flower bushes, happily drinking afternoon tea and eating desserts while telling stories that they had never heard of before. At first, Gong Qiu did not eat, but after being beaten up by Gong Yimo, he became obedient. Moreover, after listening to Gong Yimo's stories, those delicious desserts seemed to become unimportant. At this moment, Gong Coco's eyes were filled with longing. She held Gong Yimo's hand and asked repeatedly, "What happened after that? After that? Did they succeed in flying? Can something like an airplane really bring people into the sky?" Gong Yimo gestured for her to calm down. "They've definitely succeeded. The 2 brothers have also become world famous because of this feat." At this moment, Gong Qiu was a little absent-minded. Seeing that Gong Yimo was only talking to his younger sister, Gong Qiu got jealous and leaned forward to ask, "Mu Fei, about the phone call you mentioned yesterday, I've thought about it for a long time. I keep feeling like something's missing." Oh. Gong Yimo smiled and asked him, "What do you think is missing?" Gong Qiu said, "This kind of wired phone can't be too far away. This way, it'll be a little useless. If only it could be transmitted wirelessly." Gong Yimo blinked. Qiu is very smart. Of course there was a wireless phone later, but, she rambled on, and the two children listened attentively. A real world seemed to gradually appear in their minds. In that world, there were four-wheeled cars that ran faster than horses, houses made of reinforced concrete, ships that flew into space, and boats that went deep into the sea. All of this tested their imagination too much. Gong Qiu even started to believe what Imperial Father had said before. He said that Mu Fei was a fairy who came from a faraway place. In other words, what Imperial Mother said was not fake, but a real world that people yearned for. Gong Coco also looked forward to a world where men and women were equal. Although she was a princess and Dai Yu State was open-minded, in the stories of mothers and wives, not only could those women leave the house, they could also have their own careers. They could even ask their husbands to only have one wife. If they were not satisfied with each other, they could even agree to separate. It was really too beautiful. If only she could really go and take a look. When Gong Dai arrived, this was the scene he saw. The sun shone warmly, and in the garden where hundreds of flowers bloomed, his beautiful wife and two cute and intelligent children whispered together. "What are you doing?" When Gong Dai arrived, the three of them immediately shut up because Gong Yimo had made a rule that these things had to be kept a secret from Imperial Father, otherwise, they would have to listen to stories. Therefore, the two little ones were very disdainful of Gong Dai, who disturbed them while listening to stories. Gong Dai was a little resentful. Seeing the children glaring at him angrily, he sat beside his wife embarrassedly and wondered if he was already old. Otherwise, why was he falling out of favor? He touched his face, which had not changed at all, and was deeply suspicious. Gong Coco had not heard enough, so she smiled and pushed Gong Yimo in Gong Dai's direction. She said softly, "Mother, Imperial Father is here. Play with Imperial Father. But can you accompany Keek at night? Keek is scared." Gong Dai had a bad feeling when he heard this. This little girl was actually starting to poach people again. This was already the 10th time this month. Gong Yimo originally wanted to refuse, but when she saw the other party's round and longing eyes, all her refusal turned into the word okay. Gong Dai's face darkened, but Gong Coco cheered. "That's great. I like Mother the most." Gong Dai did not have the strength to complain. When they were young, the little girl who said that she liked him the most had a change of heart in front of him. Forget it, as long as they did not pester his wife tomorrow. At this moment, Gong Qiu spoke, "Imperial Mother. Tutors were is sick. Can Imperial Mother help me teach tomorrow?" If Imperial Father's words were easy to understand, then Imperial Mother would be able to make these boring things very interesting. Just like when Imperial Mother talked about geography, she would also talk about the food and customs formed because of the geography. She vividly described it, as if she could let him see and taste it with his own eyes. When Imperial Mother talked about history, she was even more witty and opened a new chapter. He had a feeling that when other people talked about history, they were all inflexible, but Imperial Mother was different. She seemed to stand at the highest point and interpret everything from God's point of view, which could satisfy his thirst for knowledge. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai was eager to learn, so she naturally opened her mouth to agree, but her mouth was covered by him. The two little ones looked at Gong Dai angrily. Gong Dai felt that his status in this family had plummeted. Indeed, every dog has its day. Gong Dai gritted his teeth. "Momo, have you forgotten what day tomorrow is?" Gong Yimo blinked with a dumbfounded expression. Gong Dai was angry. Royal sister actually forgot about their 10th wedding anniversary. "Don't tell me you really forgot." Gong Dai's face was very gloomy. The two little ones hurriedly ran away. At this time, Imperial Father could not be provoked. But provoking him meant that they were convinced. Really, Imperial Father was already an adult, and he was still a man. He actually dared to snatch Mother from them. How shameless. Gong Yimo's mind flashed and she sneered, "I remember now. How could I forget?" Gong Dai's expression eased a lot. However, He heard Gong Yimo ask tentatively, "Tomorrow is Keek's birthday?" It seemed to be a few days away. Gong Yimo. Gong Dai was angry. His child was becoming less and less important to him. It was fine if he snatched his wife, but his wife only had the child in her heart and not him. Thus, the Prince Regent ran away from home. Chapter 784. Due to the fact that his status in the family was getting lower and lower, his two children were pestering his wife, causing him to fall out of favor, and his position in the royal sister's heart was uncertain. When his son was 12 years old, the regent waved his hand and made a decision that would affect his happiness, sex, for the rest of his life. He abolished the puppet emperor and made Gong Qiyu the crown prince. As for him, he went out incognito, and the crown prince took over. Gong Qiyu immediately refused. He went to Gong Dai to protest, but was cruelly rejected by Gong Dai. Then, he went to Gong Yimo to appeal. "Imperial mother, does imperial father not like me?" Gong Qiyu had already grown into a delicate young boy. He inherited his looks from Gong Dai, but he also inherited some aspects from Gong Yimo, such as those eyes that seemed to be able to speak. At this moment, the young boy's face was downcast. His eyes were dim and stubborn as he asked this question, causing Gong Yimo's adorable heart to instantly overflow. She half-hugged her son and said angrily, "How dare he not like you? Mother will help you beat him up." Gong Qiyu, who was in her arms, rolled his eyes and said in a low voice, "Mother, I can't bear to leave. Mother, I can't bear to part with you. Can I not leave?" When someone who didn't often act coquettishly suddenly called her mother, the lethality was simply explosive. Gong Yimo's mind rushed, and in the next second, her mouth was covered by the elusive Gong Dai. Gong Dai's black jade-like eyes were filled with anger at this moment. He knew this kid was going to ruin things. Relying on his height advantage, Gong Dai directly threw Gong Qiyu away and hugged Gong Yimo in his arms as he said coldly, "Brat, you're 12 years old, not 2 years old. You're not allowed to stick to your mother like this." Gong Qiyu was very angry when his father suddenly appeared to mess things up when he was about to achieve his goal. Father is already 30 years old, but isn't he still pestering mother? With this big and small argument, Gong Yimo had the most headache. She was naturally not good at dealing with this kind of thing. At this time, she could only shrink her body and reduce her presence. However, the flames of war still burned her. "Your mother likes to be with me." Gong Qiyu refused to be outdone. "Imperial mother also likes to be with me." Gong Dai's eyes burned with rage. He lifted the head of his wife, who was hiding in his arms, and said word by word, "Tell him, who do you like more?" Gong Qiyu shouted angrily, "Mother, you said you liked me." Gong Yimo felt a headache coming on. She looked at Gong Dai, who had a serious expression on his face, and then looked at her son. She swallowed her saliva. Thinking that Gong Dai was already an adult, she couldn't possibly argue with a child, so after hesitating, she opened her mouth slightly. Gong Dai instantly sensed her intentions and lowered his head to block her lip. Hey, our son is still here. What was there to be afraid of? It wasn't the first time anyway. Every time Gong Dai couldn't win over the child, he didn't mind personally expressing his ownership. When Gong Qiyu saw this, his face was filled with anger. This again. Every time Imperial Mother's heart softened, Imperial Father would use his beauty to trick her. His cheeks turned red, and he retreated in defeat. However, even though he retreated in defeat, Gong Coco was still standing firm. Keek blinked her ignorant eyes and ran over. "Imperial Father, what are you doing? Why are you eating Mother?" Upon hearing her daughter's voice, Gong Yimo quickly pushed Gong Dai away and glared at him. Gong Dai expressed his grievance. These little brats took turns to occupy her, and he hadn't had a chance to get close to her in a long time. Didn't they see that his eyes were green with hunger? "Keek, aren't you in class? Why are you here?" Gong Coco definitely wouldn't say that her brother wanted her to come. She continued to act cute, her round face full of innocence, but it quickly turned into grievance. She hugged Gong Yimo's leg. "Mother, you don't want us anymore? Aren't we going to become homeless children?" Gong Dai instantly felt that something was amiss. This little girl was much harder to deal with than her brother, especially when she had a trump card. Gong Yimo instantly melted into water. She hugged her daughter and said with a smile, "How can that be? Keek is mother's little darling." Gong Dai indicated that his big darling was jealous. Gong Coco instantly used her trump card. Her big eyes were filled with tears as she raised her head 45 degrees to look at Gong Yimo. But mother wants to leave with father. Gong Yimo suddenly felt that there was no need to leave. The child was the most important. In the next second, Gong Coco was carried up by Gong Dai. She felt that something was amiss and struggled. "Mother, save me." Gong Yimo was about to reach out when Gong Dai said sternly, "Momo, I want to cultivate a relationship with my daughter." With that, he took Gong Coco away. Nothing bad would happen, right? But Gong Yimo's heart was big. Anyway, they were all blood-related. What could happen? In the end, Gong Coco stopped crying. She said angrily, "Father, you're too much." Gong Dai raised his brows slightly. "I want to make a deal with you." "What deal?" Gong Dai's eyes flashed. "Didn't you say that you wanted to go out and play? As long as you promise father to let your mother go, father will let Chuxingfeng go out with you." "Really?" The little girl's eyes suddenly lit up. "When has father ever lied to you?" The little girl smiled so widely that her teeth could be seen and her eyes couldn't be seen. She kissed Gong Dai on the cheek. "I knew father is the best. Father, go on your honeymoon. Do your best and give Keek a younger brother to play with." Gong Dai thought that if he gave birth to another child, he wouldn't be able to hold a wife. Royal sister was becoming more and more motherly. She was no longer the royal sister who would compete with children for favor. If he gave birth to another child, he was afraid that royal sister would forget about him. No, he couldn't bear this grievance. This time, when he went out, he must make his presence known and let royal sister only have him in her eyes again. The father and daughter reached an agreement. Gong Yimo was quite puzzled. She wanted to ask Keek, but Gong Dai carried her back to the room. "What are you doing?" Gong Yimo was puzzled. It was broad daylight. Why did he close the door? Gong Dai pursed his lips and looked at her with a mournful expression. "Royal sister. How long has it been since you slept with me?" Gong Chiu pestered him during the day and Gong Coco at night. How long had he been celibate? Gong Yimo blinked. She was just starting to feel like a mother. Could it be that she had neglected Gong Dai? She didn't seem to have done so. Gong Dai saw her confused expression and secretly gritted his teeth. It was impossible to rely on this delicate little wife to find her conscience. The last time he ran away from home, he had to come back on his own. He decided to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. Seeing Gong Dai push her down, Gong Yimo subconsciously said, "It's not good for the child to know about this in broad daylight." Gong Dai bit her lip to vent his anger and said aggrievedly, "Royal sister, you've changed. I'm no longer the most important person to you, eh? Look at me." Gong Dai forced her to look into his eyes. Gong Yimo was stunned and was bitten again. Gong Yimo's lips were soft and bouncy. Once he bit her, he couldn't stop. Gong Dai began to focus on licking her lips. Gong Yimo's scorching body temperature was transmitted to her body, and her breathing gradually quickened. Gong Dai gradually became dissatisfied and kissed her more and more passionately. Gong Yimo couldn't help but let out small fragments of moans. In the midst of their entanglement, Gong Yimo heard Gong Dai's domineering declaration. "You'll always be mine alone. No one can take you away." Chapter 785. In the end, the two of them still left. Was it really a good idea to leave two children at home to take care of the family business while going on an incognito trip? Gong Yimo's heart softened when she thought of Gong Coco's pitiful crying. "Why don't we wait until they're a little older before leaving? They're so pitiful." Gong Dai secretly gritted his teeth. He didn't know who he took after. His two children were more scheming than the other. In front of the royal sister, they put on an expression of "I've been wronged, but I won't say it." In front of him, they used all kinds of tricks and extortion. This time, he was able to successfully bring his wife out. Who knew how many benefits he had promised? Thinking about it made his heart ache. They were clearly so adorable when they were young. Don't worry. Gong Dai held it in for a long time before he said sullenly. They're all grown up. They also need to temper themselves. Gong Yimo thought about it and agreed. Anyway, it wasn't like they weren't going back. Then, when she thought about how they were out, she instantly felt a little excited. Then where are we going to play? Gong Dai dotingly tapped her little nose. We're going on an incognito trip to experience the people's lives. Gong Yimo glanced at him disdainfully, then became cheerful again. Since that's the case, let's go to Jiangnan. The wealthier they are, the easier it is to breed corrupt officials. Let's get rid of evil for the people. Gong Dai looked at her energetic appearance and smiled lightly. We'll do as you say. Thus, the two of them rode along the Grand Canal and slowly went south on the same horse. At the turn of spring and summer, the scenery was just right. With their outstanding looks, they were a beautiful sight wherever they went. Gong Yimo had no choice but to disguise herself and Gong Dai slightly. Although they were still very beautiful, they didn't have the feeling that people couldn't take their eyes off them. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at Jiangnan. They didn't go to the big cities, but to the small towns where the scenery was as beautiful as a painting. Gong Yimo had been having so much fun recently that she didn't want to go home. Her favorite thing to do was to go to those handicrafts and eat those unique foods. Ah, it smells so good. I think I found something good to eat. Gong Dai, wait for me here. I'll go buy it. Before Gong Dai could say anything, his lovely wife smelled the aroma of the food and ran away. Gong Dai sighed and smiled as he drank his tea. Recently, he finally enjoyed the happiness of having only him in his little wife's eyes. His charm was indeed much greater than the children's. This street was very lively. There were not many people drinking tea in the tea shed where Gong Dai was, so it was relatively quiet. Suddenly, a person flew in from the door and smashed the tables and chairs. Everyone in the tea stall was shocked and ran away. If Gong Yimo was here, she would definitely do something about it. However, Gong Dai just frowned and continued to drink his tea calmly. He still had to wait here for the royal sister to come back. An arrogant and despotic voice was heard. It's your honor that I took a liking to your daughter. You have to pay back what you owe. Don't be so shameless. The man who fell to the ground struggled to get up and was about to rush out again. His voice was furious. He held the broken leg of the chair as if he wanted to fight with his life on the line. Beast! Give my daughter back to me. Then, a woman's sobbing voice was heard. Father, save me. Gong Dai pretended not to hear. Since he wanted to gamble, he should bear the consequences. When the owner of the tea stall saw that the other party was making a ruckus in front of his door, causing the customers to run away, he muttered softly, Ari, what a disaster for the innocent. However, he did not dare to say it out loud. It was obvious that the other party's background was not small. The old man's failure to appreciate kindness made the scoundrel very unhappy. He kicked him again. At this moment, the young girl broke free from the scoundrel's servant's hand and rushed towards the old man. In her panic, she saw Gong Dai and her eyes lit up. The other party had starry eyebrows and bright eyes. Although his expression was cold, he exuded a noble aura from his bones. He was dressed in ordinary black clothes. Even if there were no embellishments, it was still very eye-catching. She almost did not think about it and begged him for help. Young master, please save my father. She cried like a pear blossom in the rain, but it made Gong Dai slightly frown. The other party was so noisy and looked like a fox. If the royal sister saw this, she might be jealous. Therefore, Gong Dai took out a banknote from his sleeve. Take this to pay off the debt. Don't bother me. His voice was surprisingly cold, making the crying young girl tremble. However, it was also surprisingly pleasant to hear. The young girl trembled as she took the banknote. On it was clearly written 100 taels. Her father only owed someone 10 taels of silver and she was being dragged to pay off the debt. However, this quiet and handsome man did not even look at it and gave her 100 taels. The young girl's heart was thumping and many thoughts flashed through her mind. However, she did not have time to think about it. She quickly ran back and gave the money to the other party and said loudly, "This is 100 taels. Just now, that young master had already bought me. I'll return the money to you. Return my father's promissory note to me. At this time, the scoundrel was surprised. Someone actually spent 100 taels to buy a little girl. Although she looked good, she was not a courtesan in the city. He walked into the tea shed and saw Gong Dai. Gong Dai was just sitting there quietly and did not look at him. However, that cold and noble temperament made the scoundrel a little hesitant about the other party's origin. However, when he thought about it, what kind of noble person could there be in this small town? Therefore, he unceremoniously stepped forward and said loudly, "You want to buy her? 100 taels is not enough." When the young girl heard this, she angrily said, "My father only owes you 10 taels. Why is it not enough?" The scoundrel looked at her lecherously and said with a smile, "Little girl, do you think that I, Master Chiu, am a philanthropist? If you borrow money, you have to pay interest. Your father owes me 2 months. With the interest, you should pay me 300 taels. What?" The old man sat on the ground and shouted in horror, "But, you clearly said that you only want 10% of the interest." The scoundrel wearing fancy silk took out a piece of paper. "Here, it's written in black and white. You can't read, who can you blame?" As he spoke, he stared at Gong Dai with his pair of small eyes. "If this little brother wants to be a good person, sure. Give me 300 taels and this little master will leave immediately." The young girl looked at Gong Dai with a pale face, but in the end, she did not speak. 300 taels, she would never see that much money in her entire life. Gong Dai's white fingers imprinted on the green jade teacup. These were all tea sets brought by the royal sister, as well as the best tea leaves and spring water. Unfortunately, these people spoiled the mood of tea tasting for no reason. Listening to the noise by his ear, Gong Dai stretched out his hand and a gust of wind snatched the loan receipt from the scoundrel's hand. The scoundrel was startled when he heard Gong Dai's cold voice. Scram! Anyone with a brain would know that this move of his was not ordinary. The scoundrel had never suffered such humiliation in his life. He wanted to make a move, but the other party was unfathomable, making him somewhat timid. He could only grit his teeth and speak. "Little brother, it's better to mind your own business. This is Yang City, it's not a place where you can behave atrociously." Gong Dai did not speak. The scoundrel said again, "Little brother, you're not a local, right? In Yang City, there's no one who doesn't give face to Master Chiu." Chapter 786. Gong Dai finally put down his teacup. In order to end this quickly, he was too lazy to waste his breath on these people. He lifted his finger and 3 drops of tea flew out from the teacup. With a wave of his sleeve, the water droplets shot towards the servants behind the bully. The few of them fell to the ground, not knowing if they were dead or unconscious. The bully was frightened and the rest of the servants cried out in alarm and hurriedly ran away. They even forgot to say some harsh words. The surroundings finally quieted down and Gong Dai continued to drink his tea. The young girl was in a daze. She did not expect that the matter that was like a disaster to her and her father was just a simple matter to him. At that moment, Gong Dai's indifferent look, in her heart, was like a celestial being who saved the world, unfathomable. Gong Ju's slender fingers moved, and the IOU turned into ashes at his fingertips. After doing all this, he didn't even move his clothes. He was still indifferent and noble, and didn't even glance at the people around him. The young girl swallowed her saliva. She only felt that for such a person, even the mud under his feet was noble. She did not care about her gambling addict father and chose to kneel in front of Gong Dai. Gong Dai frowned and threw a piece of silver to the tea stall owner to compensate for his loss today. However, he did not care about the young girl at his feet. He was thinking, why is royal sister not back yet? "Young master," the young girl called out timidly. Her beautiful face was mesmerizing. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at him. She could hear the sound of her own heartbeat. "Thank you, young master, for helping my father repay his debt. From now on, I am young master's woman. Whether I am a slave or a servant, I will follow young master's orders." The old man also got up on his own. Seeing that Gong Ju had helped him, he ran over to thank him. He also saw that Gongju was handsome and generous. His daughter looked like she wanted to entrust him with her care. Although the old man was reluctant, he still went with the flow. If benefactor does not mind, my daughter will be benefactor's concubine. Father. The young girl heard this and her cheeks turned red. Her heartbeat quickened. Faced with such a turn of events, Gong Dai was impatient and rejected. I'm 30. The old man and the young girl were both stunned. They didn't think that the young master who looked at most 20 years old was actually 30 years old. The girl had just turned 14. The young girl pursed her lips and thought to herself, this young master is so talented and talented. Even if he's 30, he's still out of my league. Therefore, she suppressed her shyness and said, this little girl is willing to serve the benefactor. Gong Dai frowned. I already have a wife. I don't need another woman. The girl's face paled. She was beautiful and had a good figure. There were many people in Yang City who wanted to marry her, but she never liked those people. She also had a father who loved gambling. She didn't expect that when she rushed to become her benefactor's concubine, her benefactor would reject her without even thinking about it. But when he thought about it, his benefactor's wife was probably around this age. She was a middle-aged woman. Even if she was still charming, how could she compare to her tender age? Therefore, she gently bit her lips, and her charming face became even more alluring. This little girl doesn't need any status. Her father was shocked. He didn't understand why his daughter suddenly took the initiative. The other party looked noble, but his background was unknown. She didn't even want a status. Wasn't it too unworthy? How could the young girl not know her father's thoughts? But she had a feeling that the man in front of her was very noble. Even if she didn't have a status, it wouldn't be a loss. Moreover, she had confidence in herself. She would definitely win her benefactor's pity and beat that old wife. Gong Dai's brows tightened. His body emitted a heavy chill. The other party's unreasonable pestering had exhausted his patience. The young girl was shocked. In the next second, she was suppressed by the other party's aura and couldn't speak. At that moment, she even had a feeling that the other party would kill her. Why? She widened her eyes in horror. She didn't do anything wrong, but in the next second, a gentle breeze came and saved the two of them. The warm inner strength dispersed the chill on Gong Dai's body. His body relaxed and he suddenly said to the door, "Why are you only back now?" The girl's charming voice came, like a spring breeze. "My curly duck slices were all made on the spot. It took some time." The young girl widened her eyes. This voice, could it be the benefactor's wife? No wonder her benefactor was so heartless. It must be because his wife was nearby and he couldn't bear to see her sad. But which man didn't cheat? She went to the pub to sell flowers and had seen a lot of it. Since her benefactor valued his wife's feelings, then she would start with her. Presumably, her benefactor's status was noble and his wife was virtuous. In order to pretend to be magnanimous, he would accept her, right? With this thought, she raised her head and looked towards the door with a pitiful face. At that moment, it was as if a flower was blooming. A girl who looked like she was in her late 20s stood in front of the door. She was wearing a light green gauze dress. Her whole person was like a willow in the early spring, delicate and gorgeous. She was carrying an oil paper bag in her hand and looked over with a smile. It was as if she was a living painting. Her eyebrows were raised and her eyes were bright. Her temperament was remarkable. That appearance shocked the young girl to the spot. How could there be such a beautiful woman? It was as if she was glowing. She must not be her benefactor's wife. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo had removed her disguise and knew that the royal sister must have been here for a while. Seeing someone pestering him, she felt uncomfortable and purposely removed her disguise to show off her power. Being so jealous, she was just too cute. Gong Yimo was very satisfied with the effect of her appearance. The people in the tea stall were stunned. She walked in with a smile and said in a charming voice, "Husband, who are they? Why are they kneeling to you?" At that moment, the young girl heard the sound of her heart breaking. She had thought that her benefactor's wife would at most be a middle-aged woman. She didn't expect that she was only a few years older than her and was a devastatingly beautiful woman. She was discouraged and a little angry as she said in a small voice, "You are my benefactor's wife. My benefactor has just bought this little girl. This little girl is willing to serve you as a slave." Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows and walked closer. "Oh, what should I do? I don't like my husband to have other women by his side." Her jealous words were said very naturally, but when everyone heard it, they felt that it was right. Such a beauty should have special privileges. The young girl didn't expect the other party to admit that she was jealous in front of her husband. In a panic, she couldn't help but cry towards Gong Dai. "Benefactor, what should I do? I really want to repay your kindness." Gong Dai was numbed by her mushy words. He quickly stood up and walked towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo squeezed his hand. "My husband is so cruel. This girl is crying so pitifully." Gong Dai looked at the young girl at his feet. "Does it have anything to do with me?" As he said that, he didn't care about the young girl's pale face and walked out with Gong Yimo. "They are so noisy." Gong Yimo secretly laughed. "You're not moved at all?" Gong Dai held her out of the door and said as if he was relieved, "My heart is with you. How can I be moved?" Gong Yimo smiled like a flower. Chapter 787. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo held hands as they walked on the streets. It was an inappropriate gesture, but both of them were gentle, as if they were one with heaven and earth. When others saw them, they felt that this was how they should be. After they left the small town, they went to Kargalik, the largest and most prosperous city in the area. Kargalik's prosperity was comparable to the capital, but it was less luxurious and more extravagant than the capital. The weather was perfect, so Gong Yimo brought Gong Dai to shop. After all, they had more money than they could spend. "Gong Dai, look at how beautiful this dress is. Keek will look beautiful in it." Even though both of them were in disguise, their innate beauty was pleasing to the eye. The lady boss of the largest clothing store in Kargalik admired them quietly for a while. When she saw that they had taken a fancy to something, she hurried over to promote it. She was about 30 years old, with a voluptuous figure and a soft voice when she spoke. "Young lady, you have good taste. This is a new design. It's made of silk, and the embroidery on it was made by more than a dozen embroiderers over a month. Although it's expensive, it's really good." Gong Dai wouldn't spoil her mood. He knew that royal sister just liked the process of shopping. He was happy to satisfy her desire. Besides, the quality of the dress was acceptable and could barely match his wife. "You'll look good in it too. Let's buy it." Hearing Gong Dai's words, Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed. "I'm already so old, this pink color." The lady boss was amused. She waved her fan and teased, "Young lady, you're so funny. I don't think you're even 18 yet." Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed. Ever since she took the poison, her appearance hadn't changed. She had always looked like an 18-year-old. Gong Dai even said sadly that he was going to grow old in the future. "No. I'm already in my 20s. Gong Yimo knew that no one would believe her, so she thickened her skin and made herself look younger. But the lady boss was still shocked. "I really can't tell. How do you take care of yourself?" Her face was full of curiosity and thirst for knowledge. When Gong Yimo didn't know how to answer, there was a sudden noise outside. Gong Yimo turned her head to look, only to see a group of people suddenly appear on the wide road. They forcefully opened the road. Behind them, a luxurious sedan slowly walked over. Gong Yimo took a look. Although the other party's palanquin couldn't be compared to her princess palanquin, it was so luxurious that it was blinding. Gong Yimo asked in surprise when she saw that the commoners had no choice but to give way and leave the road empty. They were angry but did not dare to say anything. "Who is this person? What a grand display." The lady boss also glanced at him and revealed a look of disdain. "He's the biggest local tycoon in the 3 provinces of Jiangnan. He made his fortune by relying on the canal. Later on, he had more and more money. He was so rich that he was overflowing with oil. All the officials in Jiangnan had been bribed by him. Therefore, he was used to running amok. He would throw money at people for no reason, and no one would care. This time, I'm afraid he has something to ask the county magistrate to come over and give gift. When Gong Yimo heard this, she didn't have much of a reaction. When the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Moreover, this was a golden mountain and a silver nest. How could there be so much unsullied? However, if he was taking money that offended the heavens and went against his conscience, then don't blame them for being ruthless. Gong Dai immediately saw the eagerness in Gong Yimo's eyes. His little wife was really full of energy at all times. Seeing that Gong Yimo was curiously going over to watch the show, Gong Dai bought the clothes and also bought a few more. The lady boss rarely saw such a generous customer. One must know that these clothes were not cheap. Each one was worth thousands of gold taels. Even the county magistrate and his wife would only take one piece at a time. She praised with a smile. Young master is not only handsome, but also dotes on his wife so much. I'm so envious. Gong Dai maintained his usual aloofness, but the slightly upturned corners of his mouth revealed his good mood during this period. While he was waiting to pack up, a commotion suddenly came from the other side. Gong Dai looked over and saw that his little wife was surrounded by people. How could this be? Gong Yimo was a little confused. She only came to watch the show. How could she be surrounded? Moreover, there was a short man with a mustache circling around her. As he circled her, he spoke. Top quality, it's really top quality. This will definitely satisfy my lord. It was no wonder that he was so surprised. Although Gong Yimo used a disguise technique to hide her appearance, she was still a great beauty from the inside out. Being in a high position for many years made her exude a kind of awe-inspiring noble aura. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also an inviolable beauty. What's wrong? The curtain of the sedan was lifted and a big fat man raised his voice to ask. The short man hurriedly went forward. Master, this little one found something good. When Gong Yimo heard this, she clenched her small fists angrily. You're the one who's a good thing. When the fat man heard this, his interest was raised. He walked down from the sedan and personally looked at Gong Yimo. As he looked, he nodded. Good. Good. Your dog's eyes lit up for once. You caught such a beauty. Bring her away. Wait, what are you doing? When Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai had come, she signaled him to not move first and then asked with a frightened face. In broad daylight, you want to snatch a commoner's woman? The fat man still had some patience towards beauties. He chuckled and his eyes narrowed into slits. This master has plenty of money. Why would I need to snatch? Where's your family? I'm going to buy you. Gong Yimo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Buy me? Why? The fat man raised his chin and looked at her with his nostrils. Do you think this master can't afford you? Tell me, where's your family? Gong Dai couldn't hold it in anymore. This damn fat man actually said that he wanted to buy his treasure. When Gong Dai was angry, the surrounding people felt the pressure and subconsciously avoided him. The fat man immediately noticed such a handsome man and felt the other party's aura. He was slightly stunned, but then he remembered that there was no such person in the whole of Jiangnan. It was obvious that there was no such person. You're from her family? When Gong Yimo saw Gong Dai's gloomy face, she hurriedly rushed over and held his hand. She said softly, "He's my husband." The fat man didn't expect her to be married. She wasn't a virgin, so her value would be greatly reduced. But even so, she was still a rare beauty. He still wanted to buy her first. So he said arrogantly, "Then name a price. This master wants to buy her." The surrounding commoners felt a little pity for this couple. What a perfect couple. It seemed that they were going to be separated. After all, this local rich man had money and power. Gong Yimo held on to Gong Dai and said with a smile, "I'm afraid you can't afford me." After all, her husband owned a bank. There's nothing in this world that I can't buy with 1,000,000. Chapter 788. That fatty had never been looked down upon like this before. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand. "Someone come." A person quickly walked out from behind the sedan with a box in his hand. The fatty opened the box in front of everyone. The neatly stacked gold ingots made everyone exclaim in surprise. He enjoyed the feeling of flaunting his wealth. He snorted and said arrogantly, "Here are 500 taels of gold. It's enough for you to buy dozens of beauties. This lord will use 500 taels of gold to exchange for one of your women. How about it?" Everyone was once again shocked by Qian Baiwan's wealth. Gong Dai looked at the 500 taels of gold and pursed his lips. If it wasn't for the royal sister secretly holding him back, he would definitely use the gold to open a few holes in his body. Gong Yimo was having a hard time holding back her laughter. Her husband was the one who printed money, but someone actually ran in front of him and wanted to throw money at him. Gong Dai's inner drama must be very exciting right now. Seeing that the husband and wife were very calm, the fatty was embarrassed. How could an ordinary person see so much money? Even those officials didn't say that they didn't put this box of gold in their eyes. Especially Gong Yimo's gaze, it seemed to be a bit forceful. The fatty was angry. Think it's too little? Must he use money to make them open their mouths? Thus, he waved his hand and another servant ran over. When he opened the box in his hand, everyone couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. It was actually a box of ocean pearls. Each of them was round and shiny. This was a good thing that couldn't be bought with money. Its value far exceeded that of the box of gold. Do you see it? This is a good thing. In the mainland, you can't even buy it with money. With this, it's enough for you to spend your whole life extravagantly. How is it? You've never seen so much money, right? He looked at Gong Dai proudly, hoping to see the other party's greedy expression. However, the other party only gave him a condescending glance, which made him feel a chill all over his body. After the fear, he was furious. This pretty boy is taking advantage of me. Don't be so shameless. This lord's money is enough to buy your mother, not to mention your wife. His big mouth almost reached the sky. Gong Dai couldn't take it anymore. He took out something from his sleeve and pressed it on the man's face, instantly leaving a red mark. No one expected that the couple would dare to make a move. It was the bearded shorty who trembled slightly when he saw the words on his master's face. Qian Baiwan was furious. He wiped his face and said, "Someone come. Kidnap the woman, and beat the man with silver." However, he was pulled back timidly by the short man. "Dog slave, what are you doing?" Qian Baiwan roared, but he saw that the people around him were looking at him strangely. What? The mark on his face was ugly. Shorty pointed at Fatty's face and stammered, "Master, there seems to be a money mark on your face." Now, there were 7 official seals on the banknotes, and the one on Qian Baiwan's face was the last seal. It was engraved with the words "Public Access to the 4 Kingdoms." Qian Baiwan didn't react in time. When he did, his eyes widened. "You actually dared to carve your official seal? This is a capital offense that will cause 9 generations of your family to be executed." Gong Dai looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. The next second, Fatty knelt down with a plop, because he suddenly thought that if someone really did carve their official seal, they wouldn't dare to show it off like this unless they didn't want to live anymore. Then, there was only one possibility. This seal was real. Moreover, this money seal must be in the hands of someone with high authority. No wonder this man didn't show any fear. It was because he was a noble. "Master, this little one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please spare my life." When he shouted, the people around him also knelt down. Their hearts were filled with uneasiness. This was a case of the rich bumping into the one with the money and being smashed to death by the money. The surrounding people didn't realize what was happening and also knelt down. Gong Yimo found it interesting and asked, "Fatty, you just said that you wanted to offer a beauty. Who do you want to offer it to?" That Fatty immediately put away his previous complacency and became a little fearful. At this moment, his brain was spinning rapidly and finally he asked tentatively, Replying to Madam, this little one wants to get a share of the official salt. I want to find a beauty, bribe, pay. Offer it to the regent." Gong Yimo looked at him and thought that he was really smart. No wonder he could become the local rich man of the 3 provinces in Jiangnan. He actually guessed the identity of Gong Dai with a seal and then deliberately said this to please her. Gong Yimo couldn't help but smile. Qian Baiwan instantly felt that he had guessed correctly. He had heard people say that the regent had made a private visit incognito. It must be them. So he said with a pale smile, "This madam is so beautiful." This little one heard that there was only one lovely person by the regent's side, so he had such a crooked idea. "Please don't argue with a bastard like this, little one. Okay, don't flatter me." Gong Yimo was overjoyed. She turned to Gong Dai and acted coquettishly. "Husband, seeing that he still has a repentant heart, let's not argue with him. Who told me to be so good-looking?" Gong Dai looked at her smiling face and couldn't help but smile gently. He smiled, and the people kneeling on the ground felt relieved. Then they heard Gong Dai say coldly, "Relying on your money, you bully people in the city. I sentence you to compensate every merchant on this street with 10 taels of silver. Are you convinced?" Gong Dai loosened his mouth and made Qian Baiwan tremble. He quickly squeezed out a smile and looked very obedient. "This little one is convinced." Gong Dai glanced at the crowd and smiled coldly. "I will send people to investigate. If you rely on your money and do something outrageous, naturally someone will deal with you. Get out." Yes. I will get out. The fat man didn't dare to wipe the sweat on his forehead. He didn't even sit in the sedan chair and left gloomily. The people behind him quickly followed. The whole process was very quiet, like a rat crossing the street. They were far less arrogant than when they came. Qian Baiwan walked far away before he dared to stop and look back. Seeing that Gong Dai couldn't be seen, he let out a long sigh of relief. It was so scary. Why did he casually meet such a big shot? At this time, the short man also knew that he had done something wrong. Before he could think of an excuse, he was ruthlessly kicked by the fat man twice. "You dog slave. Are you trying to get me killed? You really dare to stop anyone?" The short man felt wronged. Didn't he usually do this? Money could make the devil turn millstones. As long as they liked something, they would buy it with money. He didn't dare to resist and let Qian Baiwan vent his anger. After Qian Baiwan had vented his anger, he secretly asked, "Master, what is the background of that young master just now?" He had never seen his master kneel so quickly. Even the county magistrate didn't have the face to do this. Speaking of this, Qian Baiwan's face turned pale. Fortunately, he was smart and guessed the other party's identity at the last moment. Otherwise, he, Qian Baiwan, would have become a pauper today. Chapter 789. So he fiercely glared at Shorty, "You better restrain yourselves in the future. Don't go out and cause trouble with me. If it wasn't for the fact that I buried you well in my ancestral grave, I would have been killed by you." Seeing Qian Baiwan like this, Shorty felt even more strange. Who could actually make the master so afraid? Qian Baiwan saw that he was still acting stupid and his hand itched to give him another slap. The fat on his face was still trembling. It was obvious that he was still in shock. So stupid. Isn't it obvious? That person is. As he spoke, he pointed his finger at the sky. At this moment, Shorty's face changed color from fright. This. He actually wanted to instigate the master to buy the other person's wife. Wasn't that person's wife the legendary Princess Jiyu Guo? Gong Yimo was in a good mood after being pestered like that. She took her clothes with Gong Dai and continued to walk in the spring scenery. No one knew where they went and no one knew what they looked like. Later on, the bad guys gradually didn't dare to do evil anymore. Because every time they did evil, a young girl would appear and beat them until they cried for their parent. If they schemed against the young girl, then they would be in trouble. Because there was a cold-faced crazy wife-protecting devil behind the other party. They would definitely suffer the consequences. The common people gradually knew that those two people were the regent and Princess Jiyu Guo. Because every time they appeared, they would disguise themselves. So although they knew it was them, no one had really seen them. Slowly, the number of people who did bad things decreased. In the past, every once in a while, There would be stories of someone who committed some crime and was killed by the princess. Later on, the bad guys would tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves. In short, with the princess and the regent around, the world was peaceful. They also left behind legends that people yearned for. Late one night, the husband and wife had just finished doing something embarrassing and were resting. Gong Yimo touched Gong Dai's chest and asked softly, "Gong Dai, we have been married for 18 years. Do I still have charm in your heart?" She was a little unhappy because she liked this man very much. Would this man be a little tired of her unknowingly? Gong Ju quietly looked at the little face in his arms that was exactly the same as it was 18 years ago. Not only her face, but her body was still as delicious as it was 18 years ago. However, he was gradually aging. Although because he had reached the stage of perfection, the aging was very slow and not obvious, but there were changes. He was really afraid that in a few decades, he would become an uncle while the royal sister would still be so fresh and tender. Would she not like him anymore? With that thought in mind, he pressed on her again and asked face to face, "Where's royal sister? When I grow old, will you still like me?" The light accentuated his facial features. At this moment, his thin lips curved dangerously. His shiny black hair intertwined with his sexy collarbone, and his hormones were exuding freely. Gong Yimo was dazzled by the beauty in front of him. I used to think that when people are together for a long time, they will slowly become family, and there will be no more passion. She hooked her arms around Gong Dai's neck. Her eyes were bright and misty as she said sweetly, "But I feel that I will never get tired of you. I think, if we can live for another 100 years, I won't feel tired of you either." When Gong Dai heard this, his heart was filled with sweetness. He could not help but want to press down on his lovely wife again. However, Gong Yimo hugged him tightly. Gong Ju could hear her heartbeat, feel her softness, and her unreserved feelings. It was inexplicably touching. "When I see you, I want to kiss you and hug you. When I kiss you, I want to go deeper. When you leave for a while, I miss you so much. With you, I have neglected the children, but I have no choice. I just can't bear to part with you. I want you." Gong Dai smiled and kissed her earlobes. He said hoarsely, "I want you too." Gong Yimo blushed secretly. Seeing that Gong Dai wanted to do it again, Gong Yimo was half reluctant. However, she thought of something and suddenly grabbed his hand. She muttered softly, "You haven't told me if I'm still attractive to you." Gong Dai smiled and bit her nose. Little fool. As he spoke, he directly told her if she was still attractive. In the end, when he was in a daze, he said softly in an exceptionally seductive voice as he moved, "When it comes to you, I won't be able to restrain myself even after 100 years. When Gong Yimo heard this, she became even more aroused. The two of them fell deep into lust and experienced an incomparable satisfaction. In this world, there was love that lasted a lifetime. It was just very difficult. However, she was lucky to have met it. Another year passed. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai held hands and boarded the ship. At this time, everyone was there. Gong Koko was already 15, and Gong Chiyu was 19. "Keek, you have to listen to your brother." Gong Yimo smiled and pinched Gong Koko's face as she softly reminded her. Gong Koko cried and nodded. "Mother, will you come back?" Although Gong Yimo had been outside for the past few years, she often came back. However, if she left now, who knew when she would be back? At this moment, the old man patted Gong Koko's head. "Girl, you have to know that the stage of transformation is just the beginning. If your mother can comprehend it earlier, her potential will be greater. As long as you work hard, you will catch up to your parents sooner or later." Gong Yimo laughed. "We're just going to try. If we fail, we'll come back. Look at you, it's like we're going to be separated forever." They were going because the old man said that when he went out to sea a few years ago, he saw the Tianji map left behind by his ancestors on an isolated island. He couldn't comprehend it himself and might not be able to see a more mysterious world in his lifetime. However, Gong Yimo was different from Gong Dai. Gong Yimo wanted to stay with Gong Dai forever, so she wanted to find the Tianji map. If they didn't find it, they would come back. If they found it, it would be another opportunity. Qiu Xingfeng rubbed his head. Is there really another world other than this one? Gong Yimo smiled mysteriously. Master, don't worry about that. Practice martial arts well and take good care of Keek, okay? Qiu Xingfeng nodded. Don't worry. I will urge Keek to practice martial arts, and then I will reach the stage of transformation as soon as possible. On the other side, Gong Dai said to Gong Qiu. When you reach the stage of transformation, you'll be able to see a trace of morality. There have been people who broke through the sky and left, and there have been people who died from exhaustion. Once your mother and I go out to sea, there will be countless changes in the future. So now that I'm leaving the country and your sister to you, can you be a good monarch and brother? At this time, Gong Qiu had grown to the same height as Gong Ju. His handsome face was cold, and when he heard Gong Ju's words, he said proudly, You guys go and have fun. I'll definitely do better than you. Gong Dai smiled. Then I'm relieved. After explaining everything, Gong Dai and Gong Yimo stepped onto the huge ship together. Everything in the future was unknown, but as long as this person was by their side, they had nothing to fear. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo smiled at each other, holding hands. They couldn't tolerate anything else. Watching the ship leave, Gong Coco leaned on Gong Qiu's shoulder, feeling very sad. Father and mother have such a good relationship. I hope that mother will come back, but I also hope that they can see through the mysteries of heaven and truly stay together forever. Gong Qiu's eyes were a little red. It's okay if they don't come back. When we reach the stage of transformation, we'll go find them. Millimeter. Chapter 790. Your Majesty, it's the middle of the night. A loyal palace servant reminded Kim Yoon softly. Only then did Jin Yoon rub the space between his eyebrows. He closed the memorial and went out for a walk. The palace servants hurriedly followed him. It must be said that the most diligent person in the Four Kingdoms was their emperor. Not only did he attend morning court every day, he often flipped through memorials until late at night. However, they also understood that His Majesty was only doing this to keep him busy. Kim Yoon walked and unknowingly walked up to the star-plucking platform. This was the first tall building he built with cement and steel for Moa. Later, Moa brought Gong Dai here and said that he built it well, just like the star-plucking platform in the legends. Unknowingly, 30 years had passed. Moa and the others never returned after going out to sea. He really missed them. The sky was dotted with stars. Kim Yoon suddenly remembered what Moa said before. He said that there wasn't only one world. In the long river of history, there were countless worlds and countless parallel spaces. If he could, he really hoped that he could live in a world where Moa existed, but without Gong Ju. Kim Yoon smiled bitterly and shook his head. He asked in a low voice, How is the Crown Prince's recent governance? The Crown Prince was actually the younger brother his mother gave birth to later. Yoon Jin regretted it too late and died early. Wang Jing remarried, and the second wife treated the child badly. Kim Yoon found out in time and saved the child. That child survived and eventually became Kim Yoon's younger brother, the current Crown Prince. Hearing the Emperor's question, the palace servant said respectfully, The ministers all say that the Crown Prince is kind and wise. He is a monarch who keeps what he has achieved. As the palace servant spoke, he looked at the noble emperor and sighed in his heart. Their emperor treated people kindly and was handsome. People who wanted to marry him flocked to him. But His Majesty was infatuated and refused to marry. For a person who did not come, he did not have a single concubine, let alone an heir. Hearing his words, Jin Yoon nodded. He was also a little tired. Let's go back. The night was cold like water, elongating his shadow and giving off a sense of loneliness that was difficult to dissolve. The next day, Kim Yoon woke up. He opened his eyes. The light was too bright for him to get used to. He looked around and suddenly sat up. What was this place? He looked around nervously. Although he was frightened, he had been the emperor for so many years, so he quickly calmed down. Then, a memory that did not belong to him suddenly appeared in his mind. Year 2000. Sea City, Hua Nation. He seemed to be like the characters in the novels, who died and then reincarnated in another body. However, the difference was that he had reincarnated 1,000 years later. He was now called Jin Qiao, and he was the only son of the famous entrepreneur, Jin Shen. He was now 17 years old, and he had an annoying stepmother and an even more annoying stepmother's younger sister. Her name was Gong Yimo. Kim Yoon felt like he had been possessed. When he rushed down the stairs impatiently, his stepmother and sister were both there. His father had already gone to the office. At that moment, everyone stopped what they were doing. When they saw Kim Yoon, they were trembling with fear. His stepmother, Shu Ah-yu, was Jin Shen's secretary. She was also preparing to go to the office, but when she saw Kim Yoon, she suddenly became nervous. The young master of the Jin family did not like her, and he disliked her daughter even more. They had a huge argument last night. Now that she was leaving, would the young master bully her daughter again? At that moment, Gong Yimo sensibly tugged at her mother's clothes and whispered, "It's okay. You should go." Then, she glanced at Kim Yoon who was standing on the stairs, and her eyes dimmed. "I can get along well with the young master." Shu Ah-yu nodded. Although she was worried, she still left. Jin Qiao did not like her, and she would only make things worse if she stayed. At that moment, Kim Yoon woke up from his daze. It was really Mo-er. She looked like she was 12 or 13 years old. She was exactly the same as when he first met her. However, she seemed to be very afraid of him. One side of her face was still a little swollen, and the servants around them were also looking at him carefully. Gong Yimo was a little nervous. Her brother had a bad temper. When her uncle was not around, he would often bully her. This was also the reason why Gong Yimo left the Jin family and lived alone after she obtained the interspace. The shadow of her childhood was always with her, and Jin Qiao was her nightmare. Therefore, she was self-reliant at the age of 16. Because of the interspace, her life was quite comfortable. It also helped her mother, so her life in the Jin family was not so awkward. But now, this little girl was only 12 years old. Seeing Jin Qiao staring at her with a terrifying gaze, Gong Yimo stood up and called out softly, "Good morning, young master." Her large eyes flashed with vigilance and determination. No matter how old she was, no matter which time period she was in, her personality was the same. Kim Yoon did not know how to describe his feelings. The memories of the original body and his own memories were still fiercely conflicting. In order not to scare Gong Yimo, he replied with an "en," hesitated for a moment, and went downstairs. The servants quickly served the young master's favorite shrimp porridge, and looked at their young master strangely. They felt that the young master was very strange. He did not lose his temper when he saw this burden early in the morning. After being scolded by the old master for drinking last night, didn't he slap her to vent his anger? Gong Yimo also felt that it was strange. Today, this young master actually responded to her. Could it be that he thought of other ways to mess with her again? Kim Yoon naturally did not know what others were thinking. He just ate the porridge woodenly, and digested everything in his mind with difficulty. Looking at the tableware in front of him, although it was so unfamiliar, it had a strange habit. And Mo-er, could it be that God really heard his inner voice and pitied him for being unmarried his whole life, so he really sent him to a world where there was only Mo-er and no Gong Dai? Moreover, Mo-er was his stepsister. They had a relationship where they could openly interact with each other every day. But Kim Yoon had a headache as he thought about his previous memories. His body seemed to be a bad person, and he did all kinds of evil things. Last night, because he tried the powder that his friend gave him, he was so excited that he went into shock. He also came at this time. If he did not come, with this young master's personality, Mo-er's life would be even more miserable in the future. Because he did not like her stepmother, he bullied a little girl. This kind of person did not deserve to be Mo-er's brother, but now that he had come to this body, all the sins had become his. What should he do? Mo-er must hate him. Kim Yoon was in a dilemma. Only then did he realize that Gong Yimo had been standing there the whole time. He was shocked. "Why are you standing there? Sit down and eat." His tone was dry. He did not want others to find out that he was a fake, but he also could not bear to be fierce to Mo-er. Especially when he thought about the slap on her face from this body, he wanted to slap himself. Chapter 791. His gentle tone shocked everyone. Did the sun rise from the west today? Young master actually allowed this burden to eat at the same table. Gong Yimo wanted to say that she had eaten well, but she didn't dare to go against young master's wishes. After all, she was an orphan living under someone else's roof. If she didn't listen, her mother would be in a difficult position. Her mother saved her from her aunt's house, so she couldn't cause trouble for her mother. So she sat down obediently. She was only 12 years old, but she acted like a little adult and was very cautious. Kim Yoon's heart ached when he saw this. He saw that Gong Yimo only lowered her head to eat the dry bread in front of her, and he was a little anxious. He turned his head and said to the servant, "Go and get a bowl of porridge for her." Gong Yimo was stunned. Did young master poison the porridge? The servant was even more stunned. Young master didn't want him to poison it, right? That's against the law. Seeing that the servant didn't move, Kim Yoon frowned slightly. The domineering aura of a ruler suddenly appeared, and it made the servant's heart tremble for no reason. "Didn't you hear me?" His cold voice made the servant tremble, and he quickly ran over. Gong Yimo straightened her body and stared at him with her round eyes. After all, she was still young, and it wasn't easy for her to hide her emotions. She just stared at him foolishly. Those round eyes were moist, and it made his heart itch unbearably. Kim Yoon really wanted to reach out and touch her head, but he couldn't. He would definitely scare her. He could only settle for the next best thing. He placed a bowl of milk and egg soup in front of her. He didn't dare to be too gentle and said dryly, "Eat it all." He knew that Gong Yimo liked to eat milk and eggs. Gong Yimo felt that her jaw was about to drop to the ground. What should she do? Young master seemed to have gone crazy. When uncle came back, would he be angry? She obediently ate the egg soup, and as she ate, she glanced at him. He still looked handsome, and he was still a bad person. But what exactly was different? Neither of them spoke. One of them was digesting the memories, while the other was trembling with fear and secretly taking precautions. The servant did not even dare to breathe loudly. The young master today was too strange. Finally, after dinner, it was time for Gong Yimo to go to school. She glanced at Kim Yoon nervously and said softly, "Young master, I'm done eating. I'm going to school." In his heart, he heaved a sigh of relief. He could finally leave. The main thing was that the other party was acting too strange today. She was a little afraid that he had some dirty tricks up his sleeve. School? Kim Yoon quickly put down his chopsticks. Only then did he remember that they were still students. This era was too beautiful. Girls could go to school, and Moa was now in the first year of her first year at his school. He was in his third year of high school. He was overjoyed and put down his chopsticks. "Sure, let's go together." Gong Yimo's heart was very complicated at this moment. She looked at Kim Yoon in shock. She thought to herself, "He's here. He'll definitely make a move on me on the way." However, she couldn't go against his words. Otherwise, she would be ungrateful. Kim Yoon saw that the other party frowned but didn't resist. He was in a good mood. He quickly abandoned the breakfast that he hadn't eaten and went out with Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo saw that he couldn't wait and felt a chill in her heart. She pinched her jeans that were a little white. She was actually still afraid. After getting into the car, Gong Yimo felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. It was her first time taking the Jin family's car to school. Usually, she would squeeze in the bus. This car was indeed a famous car. Not only was the exterior beautiful, but the interior was even more gorgeous. Kim Yoon saw that Gong Yimo was nervous. He was also quite nervous. Although he had memories, this was his first time taking a car. This feeling of traveling at lightning speed was like opening the door to a new world. Especially the scenery he saw along the way. It completely subverted his imagination. The buildings could be so tall and there were so many people. There were also all kinds of new things that dazzled him. After being an emperor for a few decades, he was already able to keep a straight face even if Mount Tai collapsed. After looking outside for a while, he couldn't help but look at Gong Yimo. No matter how new everything around him was, the one that attracted him the most was still Gong Yimo. Today, Moa was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail. She looked very pure and cute. The only flaw was that her little face was tense, as if she was ready to fight at any time. Kim Yoon was a little discouraged. It seemed that he still had a long way to go before he could get Moa's approval. However, when he thought about how he could see her every day, and how the person he had been thinking about all his life was by his side, this kind of happiness was not something that ordinary people could understand. He opened the fridge according to his memory and took out a bottle of fresh milk. He opened it and passed it to Gong Yimo. He remembered that during breakfast, Moa didn't even touch the glass of milk because she was afraid of him. Gong Yimo was shocked by his action of passing the milk to her. If they weren't in the car, she would have stood up again. What was in the milk? She took it, but she didn't drink it. Kim Yoon saw that although she looked quiet, she was actually very alert. He felt a little anxious. He wanted to get along well with her, and not this way of getting along that seemed very close but was actually very far away. The car was silent. Kim Yoon thought of another topic. It's so far away. How do you usually go to school? Immediately, he wanted to slap himself. In his memory, his father had given Moa a car. However, under his intimidation, those people didn't dare to drive it. Therefore, Moa could only go to school by herself every day. At a young age, she had to wake up very early and walk very far to get to the bus stop. Sure enough, once he finished speaking, Gong Yimo glanced at him. She thought to herself, is this person mocking me on purpose? Kim Yoon coughed softly to ease the awkwardness. Before she could reply, he quickly said, wait for me after class. We'll go back together then. Gong Yimo's body stiffened again. She didn't expect him to say that again. We'll walk together every day from now on. Gong Yimo clenched her teeth. She knew that resisting wouldn't do her any good, but at this time, she couldn't bear it anymore. I can walk by myself. Kim Yoon was stunned. He didn't expect her to reject him. Gong Yimo looked at him quietly. Her big eyes were filled with tenacity, and a trace of fear. I don't know what you want to do, but young master, please say it. Kim Yoon then realized that she thought he said that with malice. Every time he thought of this, he wanted to chop his original body into pieces. What did he do to make little Moa so afraid of him? Kim Yoon frowned. After a while, he imitated the original body's tone and said, don't be so nervous. I just think that it's fun to raise a little sister. It's like raising a pet. What, you don't want to be raised by me? Or do you want me to treat you like before? His words made Gong Yimo skeptical, but if it was true, being treated as a pet was better than being treated as a punching bag. She clenched her small fists and placed them on her knees, whispering to him, what if you get tired of raising me? Chapter 792. Gong Yimo looked serious. If you get sick of me one day, can you ignore me and find a new pet? Her stubborn and aggrieved look made Kim Yoon's heart ache. How could he get sick of her? He was going to spoil her for the rest of his life. But he definitely couldn't say that now. So he pretended to raise his eyebrows arrogantly. We'll talk about it when I get sick of you. As he spoke, he looked at the milk in her hand. You have to finish the milk, understand? Gong Yimo nodded. Under his intense gaze, she drank the milk in small sips. No matter what he wanted to do, she could only deal with it as it came. When they arrived at school, Gong Yimo felt that she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Who knew that she would be surrounded the moment she got out of the car? Most of the people in this elite school were very busy, but there were also some who were bored, especially some girls who came from rich families and were at the age where they were full of energy. When they saw that Jin Chiao was handsome and generous, they were all attracted to him and surrounded him all day long. These people didn't know how bad young master's personality was. They all thought that he was a very domineering CEO and cool, but Gong Yimo knew that this person was rotten to the core. Although, Today was a little different. Who are you? Why are you in the same car as young Master Jin? A senior girl asked Gong Yimo loudly. Although Gong Yimo was young, she had always worked hard when she was young, so she was tall and thin. The other party wasn't sure of her age and subconsciously targeted everyone who appeared around young Master Jin. Gong Yimo didn't say anything because young Master Jin had said before that she wasn't allowed to say anything about their relationship. Seeing that she didn't say anything, another girl went overboard and pushed her. We're asking you a question. Are you mute? They came from good families and were usually sought after, so it was hard for them to be good-tempered when faced with Gong Yimo's silence. Gong Yimo was caught off guard and fell backward. Then, Kim Yoon caught her. Sensing Moa's thin and weak body, Kim Yoon was furious. This body of his had a pair of thick eyebrows. When he glared at people, it was enough to make them tremble. What are you doing? Kim Yoon's voice was full of anger. That heavy deterrence was far from what these students had seen before. At this moment, when they saw that Kim Yoon was angry, all of them were like mice that had seen a cat. It couldn't be helped. The young master was usually straightforward, but if someone dared to offend him, they would die a horrible death. A girl who had a good relationship with the young master smiled and tried to smooth things over. Senior Jin, don't be so fierce. We just want to ask her some questions. It's rude if she doesn't answer. Her tone was coquettish as she tried to move closer to Kim Yoon. Kim Yoon glanced at her and froze her on the spot. Who are you? How dare you tell my sister what to do? Little sister. Everyone was stunned. Could it be that the eldest young master was interested in this? At this time, most of the brothers and sisters were recognized by themselves. It was just that this girl was a little young, but thinking about it was just thinking. Since Kim Yoon had spoken, they didn't dare to refute. They only wanted to wait until the eldest young master was gone before dealing with this girl. Kim Yoon knew what they were thinking at a glance. Because of his anger, he had always been kind to others. But at this moment, there was a hint of hostility in his eyes. I said, if any one of you dares to touch her, I will definitely return it 1,000 times. You better remember what I said. His serious tone sent chills down everyone's spines. They couldn't help but be on guard. Only then did they take a look at Gong Yimo. They were shocked. They didn't expect the eldest young master to think so highly of her. There was jealousy, but there was more fear. Since the eldest young master had said so, even if they had a few guts, they wouldn't dare to do anything. Gong Yimo was in Kim Yoon's embrace. Seeing him suddenly stand up for her, she didn't know what to feel. But she knew that this was the first time someone stood up for her. She didn't expect that it was someone who hated her. Gong Yimo suddenly struggled out of his embrace and said with her head lowered, I'm going to class. After saying that, she turned around and left. This was a sign of her being flustered. If it was any other time, she definitely wouldn't do such an unreliable thing. Kim Yoon looked at her back and suddenly smiled. It was a good thing that Moa had a reaction towards him. He still had to work harder. When the group of people saw the eldest young master reveal such a gentle smile, it was as if they had seen a ghost. What happened to the eldest young master? Did he really like this little girl? After sitting down, Gong Yimo finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everything that happened this morning was too unreal. She didn't dare to believe it. Forget it, don't think about it. Class is more important. The morning class passed just like that. When it was time for lunch, Gong Yimo held the meal card and went to the canteen. This school was a famous aristocratic school in Sea City. The food and clothes were all very exquisite. But Gong Yimo was very poor. She didn't buy a school uniform and didn't have much money for food. Her mother would give her money, but the eldest young master deliberately took away most of it. He said that a poor person should look like a poor person. So Gong Yimo could only eat vegetarian dishes. Because the food was exquisite, the vegetarian dishes were also small. Most people ordered 3 to 4 dishes. One dish was a little shabby. Gong Yimo heard someone snickering. She knew that the other party was laughing at her, but she was already used to it. People should learn to be grateful. She was lucky to be able to study in this school and enjoy an education that ordinary people couldn't get. So she took a small bowl of vegetables, a small bowl of rice, and free soup and found a corner to sit down. The senior students' canteen was on the second floor, so the first floor was filled with children around her age. At this age, most of the children didn't know how to control themselves. Their likes and dislikes were very obvious and changed quickly. Moreover, they were very competitive. Everyone was wearing exquisite school uniforms and holding the latest phones and computers. But Gong Yimo didn't have anything, so they subconsciously ostracized her and looked down on her. When Gong Yimo sat down, the people around her deliberately walked away, as if they could humiliate her. Gong Yimo sighed in her heart. In her opinion, her classmates were very happy. Moreover, they really didn't know what the suffering of the common people was. She couldn't imagine the predicament of eating pickled vegetables and rice every day when she was young and still not being full. To be honest, the food in front of her was already very good. She lowered her head and ate, but others couldn't stand it. A girl wearing a school uniform and a crystal hairpin walked step by step in leather shoes and said loudly, "Who allowed you to sit here? My mother said that beggars all squat on the ground to eat." As she spoke, everyone looked over. But she felt proud because she felt that she was doing something that others wanted to do but didn't dare to do, so she enjoyed the worship with a clear conscience. Chapter 793. I'm Not a Beggar. Although Gong Yimo was young and used to enduring, she still had a temper. The little girl laughed when she heard that. "I heard that your relatives didn't want your clothes. You're wearing other people's old clothes. If you're not a beggar, then what are you?" Gong Yimo tightened her grip on her chopsticks. The new clothes her mother bought for her were all cut up by the young master. Her uncle didn't care, and her mother didn't dare to resist. She had always been wearing old clothes. She was a beggar when she picked up old clothes. She clearly didn't beg. The servants bullied her and didn't help her wash her clothes, but she washed them very cleanly every time. "I'm not a beggar." The arrogant little girl laughed. She raised her eyebrows and asked the surrounding classmates, "Look, she can't even afford a school uniform. She doesn't pay the class fees, doesn't participate in activities, and uses inferior paper and pens. Don't you think she's a beggar?" The boys at the side shouted playfully, "She's a beggar." Then, the others also shouted one after another. "Gong Yimo is a beggar. Pauper." They made funny faces as they spoke, as if they had found an interesting toy. They were all overjoyed. They didn't know that their actions would cause a psychological trauma to the other party. They just thought it was fun. Gong Yimo's face turned red when she heard the teasing from all directions. She really wanted to fight with the little girl in front of her, but if she really did that, the teacher would definitely criticize her, and the young master might take the opportunity to cause trouble. He had always wanted to kick her out of school. She couldn't give him the chance. Therefore, Gong Yimo endured and endured. Ignoring the ridicule in her ears, she clenched her chopsticks so tightly that her small hands almost broke them. The little girl was a little angry when she saw that Gong Yimo was still eating despite being bullied and ignoring her. She walked forward and swept Gong Yimo's plate to the ground. "Why are you still eating? You don't deserve to eat with us. Get out." She was overbearing and didn't hold back. She was very pleased when she saw Gong Yimo's clothes stained with vegetable stains. She was just a beggar. Why is the class leader always nice to me? Now that the class leader wasn't here, she had to teach this poor and pedantic person a lesson. However, the people around them also joined in the commotion. They stopped eating and shouted loudly, "Get out! You're not allowed to eat with us in the future. Too dirty." Gong Yimo was stunned by the other party's actions. Coupled with the mockery coming from all directions, she felt so ashamed that she couldn't show her face. Her nose turned sour and her eyes became watery. She really wanted to run out without a care, but she also felt that if she ran out, wouldn't the other party be pleased? Therefore, she gritted her teeth and didn't say a word. She just glared fiercely at the little girl. The commotion shocked the teacher in Gong Yimo's class. When she saw the mess on the ground and Gong Yimo and the others, She could not help but point at Gong Yimo and say fiercely, "It's you again, Gong Yimo. Can't you stop causing trouble? The school is a place to study, not for you to clean up your messes." She scolded Gong Yimo to her face. Her raised eyebrows and impatient face were enough to prove how much she hated this transfer student from the countryside. It was fine if she was poor, but she couldn't keep up with the class's progress and dragged the class's grades down. She even went around causing trouble. "I didn't. It's..." Hearing the teacher say this, Gong Yimo subconsciously wanted to defend herself. However, before she could finish, the teacher became even angrier. "You didn't. You still dare to talk back." The female teacher had high cheekbones and the way she glared was very scary. She glared at Gong Yimo and sneered, "Since you're so disobedient, don't go to class in the afternoon. Follow auntie and do the cleaning. You're not allowed to go back to class until you're done." Gong Yimo's chest violently rose and fell. It was clearly someone else's fault. Why was she the one who was punished every time? Her eyes were red, like a little beast that had endured to the extreme. She wanted to argue with the teacher loudly, but her throat was choked and she couldn't say a word. However, when the surrounding students saw that the teacher was upholding justice, they all looked at her mockingly. Their gazes made her feel extremely humiliated. The differences between people were reflected to the extreme at this moment. "Did you hear that?" Gong Yimo didn't say anything, so the teacher yelled at her again. Her gaze was even fiercer. Gong Yimo clenched her fists tightly. She wanted to run away without a care, but she couldn't. She couldn't give up on studying here. Therefore, her lips trembled as she held back all her tears and finally said in a hoarse voice, "I heard that." The female teacher was still unwilling to give up. She wanted to talk to the principal about the title while they were having lunch. In the end, she was dragged over, so she was already angry. "Louder. Are you dissatisfied with the teacher?" Gong Yimo lowered her head deeply and her whole body tensed up. The female teacher snorted coldly, "It's fine if you're poor, but you're still causing trouble. You're young, but you have a lot of thoughts. Go wipe the floor. Just looking at you makes me annoyed. What are you saying, you bitch?" Heaven and earth could be witnesses. This was the first time in his life that Kim Yoon cursed, but he really couldn't hold it in, especially when he pushed through the crowd and saw Gong Yimo huddled in a corner, being bullied by a group of people. His eyes turned red, and almost without thinking, he pulled the female teacher up. He really wanted to give this damn woman a good beating. Otherwise, the anger in his heart would have nowhere to vent. However, after many years of self-restraint, he didn't do such a thing. However, the female teacher was so frightened by Kim Yoon's raging anger that her legs turned to jelly. So much so that when Kim Yoon let go of her, she felt weak all over and sat on the ground. At that moment, she looked up and realized that the other party was looking at her as if he was looking at a dead person. How frustrating. If he was still the emperor now, someone would have dragged this woman out and punished her. Kim Yoon glared at her coldly. He reached out and pulled Gong Yimo into his arms. "Don't be afraid." He was trembling as he patted Gong Yimo's back. At that moment, Gong Yimo finally couldn't help but raise her head and stare blankly at Kim Yoon in front of her. Her eyes were red, and the tip of her nose was also red. It was obvious that she was holding back her tears, but she didn't make a sound. Seeing her like this made Kim Yoon feel as if his heart had been stabbed with a knife. He forcefully pressed Gong Yimo's head against his chest, the anger in his heart raging. With a sweep of his gaze, everyone in the entire space was stunned by the surging anger on his body. "Damn it, all of you listen to me. She's my sister. If you bully her again, I'll make you pay with your lives." He had forgotten that this was the modern era, but he just wanted everyone who bullied Moa to die. At that moment, he didn't realize that the little person in his arms trembled, and her chest was quickly covered in tears. The teacher was stunned, because the eldest young master's words carried a lot of weight. In this school, the Kim family was the biggest shareholder. Chapter 794. And who could tell her what was going on? She was just a commoner in her class. How could she have anything to do with this bad-tempered young master? The children around them were even more frightened by Kim Yoon. Their senses were more sensitive. How could they, as teenagers, have ever seen Kim Yoon's murderous aura? A few children were scared to tears by Kim Yoon's gaze, but they didn't dare to cry out loud. When the teacher saw Kim Yoon so angry, she realized that she had to do something. Otherwise, her job title, Young Master, she had just gotten up and wanted to smile and say that it was all a misunderstanding. Who knew that she would be pushed away by Kim Yoon? He looked at this woman coldly. The coldness in his eyes was almost tangible. People like you don't deserve to be a teacher. How dare you touch my little sister? Very well, then from tomorrow onwards, you don't have to come anymore. As he spoke, he hugged Gong Yimo and left. The female teacher was shocked and her eyes were filled with fear. She had spent so much effort to get into this school. How could she be fired just like that? Young master, listen to me. The female teacher wanted to chase after him in a panic, but she was stopped by two people who suddenly appeared in the crowd. They were the young master's hidden servants. Hearing the young master's order, they ignored the female teacher's struggle and pulled her to the principal's office. After Kim Yoon pulled Gong Yimo out, he still felt that his anger was not vented. However, firing her was too easy on that woman. And who was the one who started this? He had to investigate later. Who dared to bully his moa? She must be tired of living. After secretly crying, Gong Yimo felt much better. As Kim Yoon pulled her along tightly, her chest felt like it was stuffed with something. She didn't know what to do. When Kim Yoon brought Gong Yimo to a small pavilion, the lunch placed by the servants was already a little cold. Originally, he had gone to look for Moa after class to have lunch with her. However, he didn't expect to see her being bullied. He was so angry that he was full. Sit down. Kim Yoon's tone was a little bad because he was still thinking about that group of children. They were not good people either. In Yuheng, 12 or 13 years old was already an adult. How could they be so stupid as to follow the trend and bully a little girl? At this moment, Kim Yoon was completely biased to the extent that a 12-year-old was an adult while his baby was still a child. Gong Yimo quickly sat down. Regardless of the reason, she was very grateful to the young master. Thinking about it, he instructed the servants. Ask the cafeteria's chef. Ask the servants, he said, go and ask the cafeteria's chef, and warm a cup of milk. He had no choice but to put up with it. He had never eaten in the canteen before. Gong Yimo suddenly realized that the other party was ordering food for her. She quickly said, I'll eat cold. With that, she quickly picked up the chopsticks in front of her and put a prawn into her mouth. Kim Yoon was a little stunned. Gong Yimo glanced at him as she ate, mainly because she didn't want to trouble him. Kim Yoon sighed. He really couldn't understand why the original owner didn't like such an obedient and sensible girl. Gong Yimo saw that Kim Yoon was staring at her. She couldn't help but slow down her eating. Because she had secretly cried before, she looked at him with her big red eyes and said carefully, these dishes are all warm. You, young master, eat them too? In the end, this girl had always been someone who didn't hold grudges. If someone treated her well, she would remember it. She was clearly afraid, but she would still remind him to eat. Kim Yoon was very touched. He really wanted to hold her in his arms and feed her mouthfuls of food, but now was not the time. Their relationship had finally improved. He couldn't scare her. However, as long as he worked hard, that day would definitely come. Thinking of this, Kim Yoon was instantly filled with energy. He picked up his chopsticks and started eating. Gong Yimo secretly breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as she finished speaking, she regretted it. She was afraid that the young master would suddenly turn hostile. Today's young master was really abnormal, but in her heart, she hoped that he would continue to be so. Lunch ended in this rare warmth. Gong Yimo didn't say anything. No matter why the young master helped her today, she was very touched. However, this didn't mean that she wasn't afraid of him. After all, the young master was known for being unpredictable. After lunch, Gong Yimo prepared to go back. Her studies couldn't keep up with the students here. If she didn't work hard, she would be even more behind. Therefore, When the others were resting in the afternoon, she was reading. But how could Kim Yoon let her go? He spent the whole morning combining the memories in his mind and coming up with a plan. Now that Moer's attitude towards him had softened, he naturally wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Therefore, when Gong Yimo whispered that she should go back, Kim Yoon directly took her away. Skipping classes was a common thing for the young master, but for Gong Yimo, it was the first time. If it was in the past, she would definitely resist. Because studying was different from other things. It was a matter of principle that she couldn't tolerate. But today, eldest young master had helped her, so she agreed to return the favor. Therefore, the satisfied Kim Yoon brought the little girl Gong Yimo to the biggest international venue in High City. Then, they started shopping. Although he had only been in this world for a day, Kim Yoon felt that he had never been so happy. Moer was here. Moer was his. He could treat her well, watch her grow up, and then eat her up. Thinking of this, Kim Yoon blushed. He had been a virgin his whole life. In this aspect, even if he was the world's #1 beauty and had been in countless brothels, he was still very pure. In order to hide the impulse in his heart, he worked even harder to buy clothes. When shopping, he didn't agree with the aesthetics of the bare arms and legs. But because he had completely merged his memories, he could accept it. Moreover, when he thought of these clothes on Moer, no, stop fantasizing. Gong Yimo, on the other hand, was constantly pushed into the fitting room to try on clothes. As long as she was wearing something, Jin Yoon would take a second look at it and buy it with a wave of his hand. The salespeople in the branded store all knew the young master. This young master was already very rich when he bought clothes for his girlfriend. But now, he was practically going to heaven for his sister. At this moment, Kim Yoon picked out a few clothes from the rack and threw them to the salesperson. Then, he pointed at the clothes on the rack and said, "I don't want the clothes in your hands. Wrap up the rest." The salesperson was speechless. Their store was really a big brand. Ordinary people would be overcautious when buying clothes. "Young master, is it really okay for you to be like this?" At this moment, Gong Yimo changed into a light yellow dress and walked out. She said timidly, "I'm done changing." There was no choice. Gong Yimo was also stunned by the other party's inhumane wealth. She didn't know what to do. Kim Yoon turned his head and his eyes instantly lit up. Then, he sat on the sofa and waited while flipping through a magazine. He could understand the words of this world. The memories left by the original body were very useful. But when he touched it personally, the feeling was very strange. At this time, he suddenly raised his head and saw a mirror. In his bedroom, there was a large mercury mirror. It was different from this mirror, but this mirror was clearly clearer. His current appearance was clearly reflected in the mirror. He had only been here for a day and did not have time to take a good look at his appearance. In the mirror, he was undoubtedly very handsome. In the past, the original body had a rebellious personality and his eyes were filled with emptiness. But after Kim Yoon came, his eyes became deep and silent, which made his appearance more beautiful. Also, he looked carefully. This face was similar to his. His previous face was too beautiful, and this face seemed to be adjusted from his original face. His eyebrows were thicker, his eyes were deeper, and his facial features were more three-dimensional and stylish. But it did not give him a sense of unfamiliarity. In short, he was very satisfied with his current appearance. At this time, the door opened and a regular customer came in. It was a great beauty. When she saw Kim Yoon, she said in surprise, "7 luminaries. You're here too?" Then, she came forward and whispered, "Why didn't you pick up the phone? Are you still angry with me?" Chapter 796. Upon seeing her, Kim Yoon's eyebrows twitched. He knew that it wouldn't be so easy to take over someone else's body. The original owner of this body was very childish. Because he was unhappy with having a sister who was a burden, he took in a bunch of sisters outside. The one in front of him was one of his favorite sisters, his junior from the same school, Lee Wire. No, he had to draw the line quickly. Kim Yoon frowned and said coldly, "Please don't bother me in the future. We don't know each other that well." His cold and heartless words stunned Lee Wire. All her smiles froze on her face. Her family was only moderately rich. Sending her to this school was already pushing it. If she hadn't hooked up with her brother, Jin Chiao, she wouldn't have been able to have so many branded clothes and bags, let alone go to this kind of place. Every time she came, she used Jin Chiao's card, okay? Moreover, Jin Chiao liked her independent and obedient the most. He seemed to be interested in her as well. Recently, she felt a little smug because eldest young master treated her differently. A few days ago, she threw a tantrum because of his pampering. After that, she called him, but he didn't pick up. She thought that he was still angry, but she didn't expect it to reach this stage. The eldest young master was too unpredictable. "Brother Jin, how can you say that?" Lee Wire frowned and looked sad. "I didn't do it on purpose last time." Brother, don't be angry. It wasn't like this in the past." Kim Yoon was impatient. "Please disappear from my sight immediately." His words were a bit harsh. Lee Wire had never seen him so fierce before. She immediately burst into tears and shouted with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Brother, you don't want me anymore?" At this time, Gong Yimo was also dressed up. Her long hair was slightly curled and fluffy by the stylist. She wore a light yellow dress and a pair of light green leather shoes. Her whole person looked like a doll from the closet. She was incredibly beautiful. She was originally happy. After all, which girl didn't like to be beautiful? But the moment he came out, he saw the scene of Lee Wire crying and calling for her brother, and the young master's face was filled with impatience. Her small face paled. She had almost forgotten that the young master had many godsisters. Those people usually bullied her because of the young master's attitude. Now that the young master suddenly wanted to raise her as a sister, it was very likely that it was just a whim, just like the other godsisters. Now that Lee Wire was crying, Gong Yimo's heart gradually turned cold. "Gong Yimo, oh Gong Yimo, wake up. How could Jin Chiao be sincere to you? If you take it seriously, one day you will end up like Lee Wire." Therefore, Gong Yimo put away the joy in her heart and walked out with a cold expression. When Kim Yoon saw Gong Yimo, his eyes lit up. "So this is the feeling of doting on your sweetheart. It's wonderful." He immediately left Lee Wire aside and walked over with large strides. "Moa." He admired her from head to toe. "You're so beautiful. Brother likes you very much." Once she heard Kim Yoon's words, Lee Wire understood everything. She was wondering why the young master had changed. It turned out that he had fallen in love with someone else, and the other party was the burden that the young master hated the most in the past. She couldn't help but take a few steps forward and cry, "Brother Jin, why are you ignoring me? Also, why is she here? Even if you want to teach me a lesson, you shouldn't do this." Kim Yoon really didn't know where this person's confidence came from. At this moment, the chief designer was at the side. When he saw Lee Wire crying, he felt a headache coming on. "Dill, can anyone enter your place now?" Kim Yoon glanced at him with an indifferent expression. His time was very precious, and he didn't care about any Tom, Dick, or Harry. When Dear heard the young master's words, how could he not understand that Lee Wire had fallen out of favor? What a pity. In the past, when she brought her friends here and swiped the young master's card, it brought him a lot of profit. But now that she had fallen out of favor, it was a different story. "I understand. Young master, please wait a moment." Then he said to Lee Wire, who was still crying, "Miss, you're not welcome here. Please leave." Lee Wire was stunned. She had always been a regular here, and Dear had never spoken to her like this. She was angry and said angrily, "Dear, what do you mean by this? You're actually driving the guests out." Dear shrugged, "I can't help it. You're not a member here." Lee Wire saw that Kim Yoon was circling around Gong Yimo, and didn't even look at her, and said loudly, "Can't I get a membership myself? Could it be that you want to drive the guests out?" Her voice was very loud and had already disturbed the other guests. Deer frowned. Originally, he didn't want to embarrass the other party. After all, the other party was still a student. But if she wanted to embarrass herself, then there was no other way. "Of course you can spend money, but our secret club's annual membership fee is 1 million. If you're sure you want to recharge, please come here." In an instant, Lee Wire's expression turned pale. She knew that the membership fee here was very expensive, but she didn't expect it to be expensive to this extent. Kim Yoon was very satisfied with Gong Yimmo's appearance, and pulled her out. Lee Wire saw that the surrounding guests were secretly looking at her, and she didn't want to stay and embarrass herself, so she quickly chased after them. Kim Yoon carefully let Gong Yimmo sit in the car, but when he got in the car, he was stopped by Lee Wire. She said with tears in her eyes, Brother, I was wrong. Don't treat me like this," she cried very beautifully. She believed that she was special in the young master's heart. Kim Yoon frowned, pulled back his hand, and impatiently kept a distance from her. What kind of taste did the original owner have? He was willing to spoil such a girl. "You'd better disappear from my sight before I get angry." Kim Yoon held the car door and looked at her coldly. He wasn't wearing any messy clothes today, and he didn't have a messy hairstyle. He was wearing a white cotton shirt and black trousers, and he was standing there like a pine tree, dazzling everyone's eyes. Lee Wire felt ashamed when she saw him like this. She couldn't help but pull back her hand, but she was still unwilling to give up. Is it because of her? She stared at Gong Yimmo, who was in the car, and her teary eyes were almost spitting fire. Kim Yoon glanced at her. No. Then what is it? Lee Wire didn't want to let it go, but Kim Yoon had already sat in the car. Because you and I are not the same kind of people. Please remember, you have no right to talk to me. No matter if it was in his previous life or now, he was always in a high position. What was Lee Wire? She was just a toy. Seeing Kim Yoon slamming the car door and leaving, Lee Wire felt a great humiliation. She and he were not the same kind of people. Then how could Gong Yimmo, who came from the countryside, be more noble than her? Damn Gong Yimmo. Let's wait and see. Chapter 797. It had to be said that in Kim Yoon's heart, Gong Yimmo was the supreme princess. She was even nobler than himself. This scene was really disappointing, but Gong Yimmo was sitting obediently beside him, which made him very happy. He remembered that he still had to bring Mo to buy a cell phone. The cell phones in this world were really good things. This way, he could contact Mo anytime and anywhere. At this moment, he realized that Gong Yimmo was a little too quiet. She sat quietly in the back seat. Her face was pale, like a soulless doll. Kim Yoon was suddenly a little anxious. Did he do something wrong just now? He had clearly drawn a clear line with her, but why did Mo look a little unhappy? Could it be that she despised him for being too gentle and not decisive enough? Mo. He looked at Gong Yimmo's side profile and asked carefully, "Are you unhappy?" Kim Yoon had no experience in pleasing his sweetheart at all. Seeing that Gong Yimmo was unhappy, he panicked a little. Gong Yimmo did not expect young master to care about her thoughts. She pursed her lips and knew that she had better not be ungrateful. So she said softly, "No, I'm not unhappy." "You are." Kim Yoon was very sure. He suddenly said to the driver, "Stop the car. Get out." When the driver heard this, he thought that young master was going to get angry, so he hurriedly stopped the car by the side and ran out. Kim Yoon then said softly to Gong Yimmo, whose face was even paler, "Mo, why are you unhappy?" Gong Yimmo knew that she should tolerate it, but when she saw that Kim Yoon kept asking, she did not know where her anger came from. She raised her head and looked at Kim Yoon coldly. "Why are you calling me Mo?" Kim Yoon was stunned. Could he say that he wanted to be close to her, so even if it was just a name, he wanted to reveal intimacy? Kim Yoon glared at her. He looked the same as before, but Gong Yimmo couldn't feel a trace of his fierceness. She became bolder and raised her voice to ask, "Also, why are you standing up for me?" Don't you like to see others bully me? Why did you buy things for me? Why? Do you want me to call you brother? Kim Yoon did not know how to explain it. Then, he saw Gong Yimmo's eyes grow darker and darker. I know, this is your new plan. Pamper me, dote on me, and when I rely on you wholeheartedly, take it all away, and make me lose everything again. How much do you hate me? That's why I came up with this. She did not finish her sentence because Kim Yoon really did not know how to explain it. He saw that Gong Yimmo's eyes were gradually becoming watery, and he panicked. He kissed Gong Yimmo's lips without thinking. It was as if something exploded in his mind. At this moment, Kim Yoon stared at Gong Yimmo with his eyes wide open. In both his previous and current lives, he finally kissed the person he loved the most. His heart was beating so fast that he forgot his original intention. He forgot everything. He only felt that her lips were small, soft, and sweet, just like the taste of jelly in his memory. Gong Yimmo did not expect Kim Yoon to kiss her at all. However, because she lacked common sense, she did not know the difference between this kiss and her mother's kiss. She only felt nervous. Her eyes were wide open, but she did not dare to move. Even when Kim Yoon bit her lips, she did not dare to move. Their breathing became erratic, and they seemed to have forgotten to think. In the end, when the two of them separated, their faces were bright red. Gong Yimmo did not know why she was blushing. There was nothing wrong with a brother kissing his sister, but didn't young master hate her a lot? Today was the second time he had kissed her. Kim Yoon, on the other hand, was excited, happy, embarrassed, and many other emotions mixed together. He knew that in this world, Mo-er was still a child. He should not have done that. He could not do that in the future. He had to take it slow and raise Mo-er until she was an adult. There was a strange silence in the car. Kim Yoon guessed that Mo-er, at her age, would not understand what he had just done. He coughed and purposely skipped the awkwardness as he spoke softly. I suddenly felt that you were very cute, so I treated you well. He weighed his words carefully and tried his best to convince her. You deserve me to treat you well, so I want to give you the best in the world. I was wrong in the past. If you don't believe me, you can test me. After all, time does not lie. No one can always pretend, right? His words were still very persuasive, reasonable, and gentle. However, Gong Yimmo was still very surprised because young master had never spoken to her so patiently before. He had also never treated her so well. He even apologized to her and said that he was wrong in the past. Gong Yimmo bit her lip and hesitated. After all, everything was too sudden. Her lower lip was fleshy. When she bit it, Kim Yoon held his breath again. He could not help but miss the kiss just now. When she bit her lip, it was so soft and bouncy. He suddenly felt that staying by the side of the person he loved and waiting for her to grow up was a very painful thing. Gong Yimmo thought that as long as she stayed true to herself, even if all of this was young master's prank, she would not lose anything. At most, there would be a slight difference. However, compared to what she would gain, wouldn't it? After all, with young master like this, her life would be much better. Just then, Kim Yoon asked softly, what do you think? If you agree, from today onwards, we will be good siblings. He prepared himself mentally. In the end, he could not resist and gently held her hand. Kim Yoon lowered his eyes. His voice was hoarse and there was a sweet ambiguity in the car. Let me pamper you, okay? Gong Yimmo's little hand moved uneasily. She looked up at Kim Yoon, her long eyelashes fluttering nervously. The redness on her little face had yet to fade. She was so cute that he wanted to take a bite out of her. Kim Yoon seemed to be bewitched as he moved closer to her. The two of them were only inches apart. Looking at her delicate little mouth, Kim Yoon's Adam's apple bobbed as he asked again. Give me a chance to pamper you, okay? I will treat you well. Moa. Gong Yimmo became nervous because the other party was really too close. She could feel the other party's scorching body temperature, as if the air in the car was burning. The other party's gaze was too intense. She lowered her head. She said softly, then, will you still kiss me? Kim Yoon was stunned. Then, he said uneasily and embarrassedly. You don't like it when I kiss you? But what could he do? He liked it very, very much. Gong Yimo blinked and was a little embarrassed. No, Kim Yoon quickly asked. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.